Welcome to another episode of Summoning Insight. Thorin and I are in separate buildings, but right next to each other because we have both come to the United Kingdom in order to do Flashpoint 2 in London, but we have to be quarantined. So sorry for the shittiness of my webcam camera. I'm here with in this apartment with my wife and my baby. So if you hear crying in the background of the stream, it's actually just TSM fans. So just remember that.
I could say I was going somewhere. So all right, there we go.
So there you go. There you go. So that's how we're going to start this one off. I don't know if we want to
well, the thing is, normally, Monty, the
Mr.
crying's just
Go.
in the Reddit thread after the show, isn't it? It's not before the show, so yeah.
I don't know if we want to involve Mr. Jensen Goh in what we could consider as North American drama.
No. Why would we do that?
It honestly annoys me because, like, what is this guy gonna have to say about Bjergsen when he's been focusing on coaching in Europe and Asia this entire time, right? The whole fanfare about this and the entire world commenting on it is very interesting to me because now I think Bjergsen was a good mid laner and I'm sad we don't get to see him on Fnatic or on a European team at any point in his career. I was hoping that's where he'd end his career, but at the same time, it's like he chose to stay in what has been the fourth best region for 95% of his career. And so when you do that, it's like, it's weird to me because as a sports fan, if I'm watching Major League Baseball, I'm not going to be too upset about some dude retiring in Korea or the Japanese league, right? Because I'm more focused on, I don't know, the good teams. So it is weird. I mean, obviously Bjergsen was a big fish who could have played in other regions and could have done quite well, obviously. But it is very strange to me to see this kind of like enormous reaction, which to me, in viewing it through a sports lens, is somewhat disproportionate to the actual event that occurred.
Oh, basically what Monty was just saying there, but he was way more eloquent and he was trying to like try it into real life aspects and contrast it. Here's the simple answer. TSM fans are that bad that they have overreacted as if Bjergsen has just died. Like they acted like someone was like, breaking news, Bjergsen is actually dead. Like, tragically, he was killed in an accident. Like, dude, are you aware? Think of this context. And everyone who hears this, use this as a thought exercise. And if this is you, sort your fucking life out. So Bjergsen, who has won LCS a bunch of times, I think, 6 titles or something. He was in something like 10 finals. Again, yes, in a lower league, dominant player, great player, won many championships, right? What he announced wasn't, I'm going from League of Legends. I would understand then. That would almost be like he was dying. He's gone forever. We'll never back. No. All he said was, I'm voluntarily, I wasn't even caught, choosing to stop play. And by the way, good news, I'm right back instantly. I'm the head coach. Now, consider this. I just released an interview today with Soaz. By the way, in case you're keeping count, Soaz, 5 championships in Europe, always a better region. 3 times semi-finalist or better at the World Championship. Literally even won international tournaments before. Had amazing competition against the greatest teams to ever play. So you notice I'm pointing out the resume of Soaz, spoiler, shits on Bjergsen's. And I'm sure even Bjergsen would probably admit it, right? What did Soaz announce, right? That after this bad year, he's going to become a coach. Same scenario. Now, I didn't see an outpouring of tears. I didn't see everyone in the world. But my God, what about... So everyone just went, oh, cool. Well, I guess, it's just his choice. He's going to go and do that. He played a long time. Like, it's just a disproportionate aspect. So this is where TSM fans don't get it, because I get it. Since they've muddied the waters of shitholes like Reddit, etc., they just now think that is reality. And they aren't aware that they skew it all the time. Like, they're like a fucking black hole warping time and space into it. And we can never escape the event horizon of Bjergsen, apparently. So, like, I totally get, by the way, why, like, we wouldn't bother bringing a guy like Jensen in. Like, he's got bigger things to talk about. But I'll even add this in, by the way. This is one of my classic ones where I make a really reasonable point and then turn it on the TSM fans. So you ready? So it's totally reasonable that actually people who are from other regions also are always worried they're going to get flamed if they talk about people like TSM, right? They always think they have to go kid gloves. But I'll tell you something very interesting a lot of people won't know. I said coming into Worlds, oh, that's the worst thing that could happen for them, bro. Like them winning LCS and getting a top seed, they're fucked. I even said what would happen. I said they're going to get like a top team from Korea. They're out there and probably get another team that's good. So I said they're fucked, right? And all the style won't work. Here's what people won't know. Actually, people who are the Asian analysts, like that guy Nelson from the LPL, who I had on my rotation show, and some of the other people we've had, they actually all genuinely thought, Monty, of the NA teams that TSM had the best chance. Not just because of the group. Don't get confused by that. They thought playing style-wise, because their logic was, of all the teams, I understand. Their logic went like this. In the LCS playoffs, TSM by the end had the best grasp on how to play. That is accurate, right? The other teams were like terrible with objective control and losing every team. So I get that, but that's why I'm going to now turn this back on TSM fans. That's why you can't now come with the angle of like, people just hate on TSM for no reason, or like, no, these guys, here's the mistake they made, Monty. They don't understand what actual shitters people who play in LCS are mentally, that they even themselves know, except for rare cases like Jensen, who, if you know his past, is a fucking unique human being. Like, that guy isn't influenced in the same way by others. So what they don't understand is this. They actually thought, because the way a lot of analysts do the game, I've noticed in Asia, is the way I analyze the game. I try to just look at like the fundamental principles. And so you notice one thing I'm very famous for is I don't wig out if someone does badly in a quarterfinal if they were the favorite. As long as they get to the next round, it's like, right, reset again. And if they have the same fundamental principles, that can be reapplied to a different opponent. So what the point I'm making here is they made the mistake of just looking at some of the basic aspects of TSM and thinking, right, well, that should carry over the Worlds, not knowing actually it won't. So people don't get it. Everyone is underwhelmed by TSM. Everyone. Except TSM fans, for about one day before it all goes off. So, yeah, I agree. I thought that whole thing was a mad overreaction. Now, listen, we could definitely wax circle about Bjergsen's career and all sorts of shit. Yeah, there's awesome stuff we can do with that. And I'm sure everyone will for the next few weeks. I had another angle, though. Do we have more on this topic, or do you want to go somewhere else?
No, let's keep going.
All right.
I'm into it.
Because here's where I want to go. I'm going to explain something to you, Monty. I've mentioned to you all previously off camera, but I'll say it on camera because, like, the relationship's different when it's the on-camera aspect. So one of the reasons you might have noticed, I don't post those links anymore. Like, I just posted this to Reddit. The reason I don't do that anymore, and the reason is because I've hired a team of people to help me with my YouTube, right? I want people to help me, like, edit it, figure out thumbnails, how do you title it? I didn't even know, it turns out, like, there's hashtags on YouTube that you can use to get people can search by. I didn't know these things. So I wasn't maximizing my YouTube because my way of doing it in the past was, like, half-assing it, but being like, fuck, I can't believe I'm getting away with this. I'm getting all the hits anyway. So like, it was working awesome, right? But then I realized, like, that's just way too much of a toll on my life doing all those extra jobs that essentially aren't like high-skilled jobs. They're like competence, but they're not high-skilled. And one of the things I've discovered when these guys went through all my analytics is, despite the fact my channel's a channel, like, I can average like 1 million views a month. I can get like some really good numbers for one guy. They found out that when you went to the analytics, only 8% of my YouTube traffic comes from Reddit in any context.
It's gone down a lot.
In fact, he was less than that. I think that was external entirely. So that was like Twitter and Reddit.
And by the way, by the way, guys, like 5 years ago, it was like 50%. Just to put this in context, but it's gone way down. So continue.
That's the point. When I checked back in the day when I first made my channel, it could have been like up to 75% when I had a very low sub count as well. Whereas obviously the one thing that stays with YouTube is like Twitter, your subs stay high because people stay subscribed. So what it made me realize is this. It's not that I ever like was scared of topics because of Reddit or what will people think. But I will say this. When I do my topics, I do it like this. I pick like the topics I really care about. I'm going to do those no matter what. That's why I sometimes do a video about someone from like Quake in 2002 that's never going to get any views. But I do then think on when I'm putting out the rest of my sort of menu, obviously I pick a few things where it's like perfect overlap. I want to talk about that and people might want to hear about that. Let's do that one. And that's going to make the money. So let me talk about the Quake guy. So I will say there are certain topics I did think in the past, you know what, I'll just blow that on a show because like that video would just get downvoted or it'd be like a massive waste of time. Well, here's the good news, Monty. If you put 2 and 2 together there, we are no longer slaves to Reddit, my friend. We can say anything we want. And so in light of that, ding, round one, right? The casting for this semi-final of Worlds was fucking garbage. I'm talking about both games. This was like I'm not talking about that, by the way, from the perspective of the people casting it. As in, it's not that I'm just like an eternal hater of all of them. I will say it as a disclaimer, I have always thought Freak was very overrated for me. I understand totally why a lot of fans like him and why he has a through line throughout League of Legends history. I get that. So I already will say, on Freak's case, I already to some degree am biased against him because I just don't like his style, don't appreciate it. But it's not just Freak. I'm talking generally. The casting for these 2 semi-finals, I'm not a commentator, but I've listened to a lot of commentary in my life. I thought it was appalling. Like, I thought some of it was really amateurish. Some of it was just bad. Like, I couldn't believe that they were putting these particular, like, sets on these games. Like, I don't know if the people came in with the wrong mindset, could have woken up on the wrong side of the bed. All these things can happen. I get it. But, like, I'm not going to just deny that or pretend like it's all cool when, like, we only get one Worlds, guys, and we don't have that lower bracket. These semi-finals, like, these were big, big games. Like, these, I sat down and watched these. Like, I would sit down and watch, like, the Super Bowl, mate. I was ready to be excited, entertained, and I thought there was a lot of, like, faux pas, slip-ups, just bad casting at times. I wanted to get your take on it. So there you go. See what? Hand grenades, mate. I throw hand grenades.
Straight into
You'll know I throw hand grenades. You know
that. So here's the thing. Now, you know that I always have believed that the casting should respond more dynamically to the teams that are playing, right? If you have two Chinese teams. Now, remember that we had guests from China. I was literally watching Lyric on some of the shoulder content, like the like post show or whatever, right? Or I figured it was in between maps or the post show, but I was watching him from the Shanghai studio. So literally you could have had Chinese casters in Shanghai casting the all LPL semifinal, which objectively, so by the way, I think the LPL casters did a very good job this year overall, especially considering their average kind of experience level. It's not a knock on them to say they're not as experienced as some of the other casters, so they're not going to deliver the same.
There's some talent there for sure.
Yeah, sure, but there's some good talent. I really like Lyric. I think he's done a really good job, and you know, I just wonder why we can't have experts from that region on the cast. I just wonder that, and it's always been true of Riot because the way that they do this is they basically just say, okay, these casters are going to be casting well in advance of before you even know the matches, which to me is like a wild way to do things that I would never do. Now, that aside, it was also interesting because we didn't see Tricasts, which have been a staple of the knockout stage of Worlds since like 2013 or 2014. And so I know that because they have to have all the casters from one region doing it, maybe that's why they didn't do it. But I felt like I was really wanting another voice, another color commentator in there. So that kind of, because I
didn't consider that.
Yeah, I've been trained by Riot to have Tricast be something special that you do for international tournaments. And because I've been listening to that for years, or I've been doing it myself, it did sort of lose the specialness to me, because that is one of the things that you really, I think, anticipate as a viewer for Worlds is the Tricast. And so even though you'd have to, you know, use three casters from the same region because of delay, and like it wouldn't work just with the speed of light guys due to the ping between regions to reasonably cast a game like that, I was curious why they didn't make that decision.
I agree. They should have at least tried to cast. Oh, sorry, you meant a Tricast. Shit, my bad. Whatever. Went off a little bit. By the way, I'll also just say, because people are going to assume it anyway in light of the way this year's gone. And by the way, like I said before, don't be afraid of Reddit. Like, those people don't exist to me anymore, so it's not a problem. We can say, do whatever we want. Listen, there's still welcome to be in the peanut gallery. Comment on things, just like if you go on the NFL subreddit, of course, comment. Get all your barbershop takes out. That's actually part of the fun of following sports. Like, that's one of the reasons I don't read it anymore. I don't want to have to take it personally. You guys say whatever the fuck you want, have whatever arguments you want. So the other thing about casters as well in this sense is, they also can't do anything to us, Monty. Like, we don't work in League of Legends in that way. No, don't get me wrong. They can throw a tantrum on Twitter. I saw that earlier this year with that whole Neon thing where they were in the wrong, but they tried to like flip it and project it all onto me because I commented on them being in the wrong. So we all know that like these people aren't necessarily like the highest integrity. But I will say, this isn't about like me and Frost scoring and the fact that like, because let's be real, if I was going to be like super biased against her, I could have been biased against her where she essentially has publicly stated that she's just biased against people who were born in the same corporeal form as me. So I'd have better reasons to hate on her. I actually think, by the way, if she got her head together and she really reflects on the way the last couple of years ago, she could be the best caster in League of Legends. I've always championed her talent. A lot of people might not know this. After she made those utterly inane and asinine comments about the kinds of people who play League of Legends a few years ago when there was that famous incident at the PAX conference or whatever. I even did a tweet at the time. I've now deleted it because she's done some more harmful things since, where I basically just said, like, don't let basically like her personality make you ignore her talent. Like, this is someone who can add value to the game. They can bring something to the game. So I still believe that at its core. But the key thing I mentioned there is that it's like, you got to take it on the chin when you fuck up. If you know you did a bad job, if you know on some level you did, listen, I know that if you go and read the comments, a lot of them are going to be like very ineloquent. They're going to be so ignorant of how they state it. They're just going to say stupid stuff like, you're obviously just biased against, I don't know, fucking damn, whatever. I mean, in that case, it would be the other teams. You know, like they pick whatever games they want. But in that case, like that isn't, there was some real basis to the problems with these games. And so if you can just reflect on that, put aside the stuff that's just toxic, look at the real criticism. These people, some of them could be the best cast. They could have given us amazing games. Like I say, it wasn't just the people assigned to the game. I also think they came in and they just got pitched out if it was baseball, or they didn't hit a single fucking ball, did they, you know?
I don't know what was going on. I think like I generally expect more of both Frostgrin and Dracos, and it's like they were both off that day, so maybe you just get really unlucky. I know in the past, you know, when I've had bad casts, everybody does when you cast hundreds of games a year. I just tweet them like, hey, I missed that Baron, or like, you know, I had the famous like Sunfire stole Baron moment, which is like kind of a meme now. But like I'm just like, well, I fucked up. Like, you know, you can only do so many live hours of broadcast, because the whole thing, guys, is it's like you have to have your energy in the right place. And it's sort of, as a color commentator, like being given an oral exam on what is going on in the game, and you have to get it right. And if you don't get it right every fucking time for hundreds of games a year, then people shit on you. It's a very high stress job. Yes. So it's tough. Now, the other thing I think about the LEC as a whole is, even though I think personally that the LEC is probably the best production in esports overall, I really, really enjoy it. And I really enjoy what all the casters bring to it. Paradoxically, I actually think the casting is the worst part of LEC. And that's not saying it's bad. I'm just saying compared to everything else I enjoy about LEC.
I get what you mean.
It's the part I enjoy the least. And I think part of that is they've got a bunch of new casters over there, or they have people whose strengths have been doing on-camera analysis and are moving them into casting more heavily. So there are all these factors, I think, that came into play. And for the LCS guys, I mean, it just sounded... I appreciated the hype that the Kobe and Freakcast brought, and I certainly enjoyed it more. But yeah, I know the observing has been an issue too, because the observing has been really weird, and I don't know why exactly. It just doesn't seem like it's at the caliber that we expect. But, you know, there were ways to rectify this problem, because there's no law that says that the casters couldn't go to Shanghai. Remember? Like, that's not written anywhere. Usually the casters maybe do groups outside, and I know there wasn't enough time for them to do the 2-week quarantine this time, but that's just a choice that you make, and I get it in terms of cost and like not being able to move them after groups to get them there ahead of time. But, you know, they made this choice to have everybody split up, and I think you're dealing with the consequences of that, which is that unfortunately you can't have the Tricast, you can't have the caster crossover, you can't have people working as closely together, because from my experience, one of the best parts about Worlds is getting everybody from all these different regions, and everyone's sitting down and reviewing tape together and sharing notes and really like getting into it. And these casters are all wonderful, that the ones I've worked with in the past are doing that. So, I mean, I think it was disappointing overall.
Oh, and by the way, to tie into what I said about like, just suck it up. Listen, I'll give credit to Dracos. Like, I saw he did a tweet where he essentially sort of owned part of it. Like, you know, he admitted like it wasn't a good day or something like that. But I will say, he sort of threw a little excuse in at the end. That get out of jail free card doesn't exist, homie. Which is where he tried to imply that like the fact that there was like no live crowd was what threw him off. It's like, listen, suck it up, sweetheart. It's the semi-final of the World Championship. If you can't handle it without a live crowd, there are other people who can. And I say that as someone who, again, has been on camera. I did a CSGO major where I was in a totally different building to where the fucking whole thing was, and obviously I couldn't know what the crowds reacted. I've known commentators. We also had a CSGO major a few years after that, where Anders and Semler were casting from like the bowels of the fucking arena, and then all the crowd was like 2 floors up or something. Like, this has happened before. I get it. It's not perfect. But don't ever do that angle, by the way, where it's like, causes some minor issues. Like, if that hadn't happened, it's like, that is unfortunately esports. Like, we're not at the stage yet where we have the perfect casting setup.
It's also
especially this
2020.
Year. Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Also just like literally, dude, like, you've been in the same studio the entire time without a crowd, and so is everybody else. And at least you're in a studio in kind of an environment where you can get separated and get into it mentally and kind of get yourself amped up. People are having to do this from their fucking bedroom, dude. They like roll out of bed and like hop on the mic and are expected to hype it like there's a 10,000 person crowd. You just got to figure it out. Like, I don't know. It's not easy, but you've had, I don't know, 11 months.
When I first got into Counter-Strike, right, because it was the beginning of the 2000s, and it was the time where the first big international LANs came along. So you can imagine all the discussion among pro players was like, were transitioning from being good online to the first LANs. So everything was about, can you handle it on LAN? And what used to be brilliant is all the European Counter-Strike players used to use this quote all the time, because obviously everyone would complain like that, like, no, but you know, when I was at home, like I was feeling better and I didn't feel so nervous. They would always just say this line that people will have heard many times, where it just said, excuses are like arseholes. Everyone's got one and they all stink. I just always remember that. Perfect, innit? Because we all have excuses, exactly. Just get over it, you know. Don't try to innocent. Like I say, even if it's true, even if that really did throw you off, that's something for you to deal with. Just don't mention that. Like, it's not going to go down well with a lot of people, put it out with. It's going to sound like you're saying, but it's not my fault. Like, I know that's not quite what you said. Like I said, he phrased it in a very sort of like, he went one way, went the other way halfway through. But I just think this has to be a learning experience. That's why I don't want what I'm afraid might happen, which is people take, like I said, the very like ineloquent, quite ignorant version of saying like you did a bad cast, which is usually like you're just a bad person or something like, and then they ignore that and go, well, that's just all nonsense criticism. Like, no, there's a grain of truth there. Come on.
I think that it really was everything kind of going wrong at the same time, and I don't anticipate that we're gonna have it happen again. But I do agree that it is disappointing that it happened on that one. And I think part of it was the series too. Like, if you've been hyped up and you're a European caster, you do have some level of bias. Obviously, everyone has some level of bias. And it probably was really disappointing to see G2 getting absolutely curb stomped like that. It certainly wasn't the semifinal that I wanted to see either. And I felt kind of deflated while watching it personally. So I kind of get it if you're really emotionally invested in this team, and to see them, I mean, it's just a bummer because last year they got choked out in the finals, and this year they got choked out in the semis. And it just seems like when they hit one of these really strong opponents, they really just don't have a like they can't fight. It's over. It feels like almost. But we'll get into that. I think we should take a break here really quickly, guys, and we're going to bring on Jensen Goh to start talking about the semifinals, get into the games, start talking about who we think is going to win the finals, and we'll be back in just a couple. We're back today with our guest, Jensen Goh. Now, many people may not be familiar with you or your work, despite the fact that you've coached many teams right now. So do you want to start with a quick introduction about who you are?
I'm known as the other Jensen, so most of the time when people say that, oh, Jensen's coming on the show, then it's not that Jensen, not Team Liquid Jensen. So I'm the bait and switch that most people get used to. But I've been kind of like grinding the minor regions for some time now. I had a short stint in Europe in 2019 when I was with Splice as kind of like a consultant / positional coach of sorts. And most recently, I was coaching with the Legacy roster in Split 1, and then I had to return back to Singapore for Split 2 due to COVID complications.
Just so people are clear, Legacy is one of the Oceanic teams, right? And then also the other thing is, what position did you actually coach in Splice?
I was coaching for bot lane in Splice.
Oh, okay. Interesting. That could be applicable to this episode.
It definitely could be.
There we go.
All right. So let's start off with some of the... Well, where do you guys want to start? Do you want to start? We've got the Team Liquid news. We've got the semifinals. We've got Abe to talk about, apparently.
Let's do the housekeeping later, because listen, I'm gonna cut people off at the pass before they can fuck with Jensen here, and I'm gonna do it for them. Right, Jensen, you did do a video before the semifinals where you explained that like Damwon hadn't learned their lessons from last year, where they had a slightly different team, obviously, and that you actually predicted G2 to win. So I'm just saying that at the outset, because I know on a lot of these shows, I hate it, mate. All people do on Twitter now is like, people who are commentators, analysts, just sit there with a blank fucking placard and then that placard, right? And then they're just like, they wait to see who wins and just write in like, yeah, I always said that team was good. And it's like, what is this shit? Like, it's about the analysis. Like, analysis stands whatever the outcome is. Because like, for example, if a 1 out of 10 scenario is what ends up being the outcome, that means 9 out of 10 times you were wrong with the analysis. So basically, give us your thoughts. Like, give us a little bit of the reasons why. I think it was based on like the way they played, like through what lanes of the map, and then what was different in that regard. Because obviously, it must have shocked you, the result, right? Because it was quite convincing for Damwon.
Yeah, let's start things off first. Is that the approach to this analysis is that you can have very different frames in which you approach analysis as a whole, right? So you can look at lane matchups to say that, okay, this player is better than this player, so this team will win. And my case, and what I'm trying to do in my YouTube series, in my YouTube videos in general, is that I either look at tactical aspects, right? So I try to ignore certain things like how players would match up. So I try to ignore, okay, this player is better than this player, and so therefore these things will happen. I just assume that teams would operate if they identify that these are the tools that they have. So based on their ban pick history, based on the way that they've been playing the map, based on how they've been setting up for objectives, I kind of like write down what trends that they have in terms of like what tools that they have and how they apply that to the map. So the key fatal flaw that I saw with not just Damwon, but rather the Korean teams is that not that they play 1-3-1, right? So playing 1-3-1 is what you want to get to eventually, but when you're behind on the map and you play 1-3-1, you end up in situations that you can be very easily exploited. And
you can get collapsed on very easily because you just stayed in lane, right? Yeah.
So in my video, I pointed out that this is exactly how they lost in 2019. And actually, SKT made the same mistakes as well. So when I saw Clip go up there, so Clip was part of the SKT roster, then he was part of Gen G as well. And when they lost to G2 in at least for game one in the exact same way, right? They were hit and then they played on 3 lanes, Rascal's eating the neutral wave, and then BDD goes to touch the neutral wave as well. So you're extended where you're behind on the map. And all of a sudden, G2's collapsing on you and you're giving up all these kills. And I was like, holy shit, Korea, they really haven't learned their lesson at all. And then I was wondering, has Damwon learned their lesson as well? Because they were the other team that lost to G2 in 2019. So I went and watched the games and it's like, they are also playing on 3 lanes when they're behind on the map.
This was the DRX series, right? That they played in the previous series before. Yes.
And I even went to check in the group stages. So I thought, okay, maybe DRX is a Korean team. They like to play draft these very low engaged, like very, they love Braum, they love time catch. That yes, you can get away with playing on 3 lanes. You can get away with opening 3 lanes and playing super greedy, right? Because they lack the engaged tools to punish you. So I went to check in the JDG series. They're doing the exact same thing when they're up against the likes of a Twisted Fate, when they're up against the likes of Camille. And that was the sign that, okay, Damwon Gaming, they haven't really learned their lesson, and this could be the fatal flaw in which that no matter how far ahead they get in the early game, this is how G2 can make these comebacks happen, which I think there was a chance for them to do in game number 3, but they kind of botched that one over there.
Yeah, by the way, just to piggyback on that quickly, just think about the way G2 normally plays. Like, they are the ultimate all-commit team when they go in. So what he's talking about here, if they actually have been able to see those openings, like, that's not that they win the game, but like those could be the picks that start to turn the game around. Because if you notice, everyone's fear, including Man coming into this series, was that Damwon has a really good early game and it's just the end of the series. Like, there's no chance at that point in time. So, like, I had the same fears, mate. Like, even though I said, like, I can't pick against G2, there's a reason I did those tweets saying, like, obviously Damwon's a favorite. What do you think, Monty?
Well, I think just to add on to Jensen's point here is that I think that's fair analysis, especially because I think the 1-3-1 is harder to pull off this year than it ever has been in League of Legends history before, because so much of it rides on the Dragon Souls, right? And when you have everybody kind of grouping up for these objectives, there's a way for the team who isn't split pushing to really provide a lot of pressure and force you to fight them effectively. So the timings have to be basically perfect for 1-3-1. You have to apply pressure very early on so that they can't stack these objectives, or you have to get early dragons yourself so that they have to be playing from behind while you take all the rest of the objectives on the map. So it's a lot more difficult to do now than it ever has been before in League of Legends history, I think. So you combine that with what he's saying, and it is I think it is, a reasonable take on perhaps why Damwon might fail.
I'll even give you another angle that I want to just throw in there. And I know that, listen, this is more in my wheelhouse, Jensen. This is just like comparing individual players and the narrative of a player, etc. But that is somewhat, in my opinion, my specialty. Like, I know how to keep the temperature of where these players are. Obviously, listen, I'm guilty of it myself because of how amazing he was. After the Gen G series, we were all incredibly high on Caps because this looked like, holy shit, not only is Caps on, there's been no craps. There's been the guy who isn't here. Well, I'll tell you what, in this series right now, he didn't show up. Like, the Caps that everyone wanted to see. Well, if you take away a player of that level of vital force, yeah, you're going to instantly diminish all of your chances to win this series. Like, and then let's forget some of the other aspects. Like, another thing that tilts the fuck out of me, because I see this with fans around Hylissang as well, right? When Hylissang or Mickey X, because they're both players who have like playmaking vision, they're the guys who just go for it if they see a player. If they try to make what would be a pick if they pulled it off correctly and communicated right, but they fuck it up and go in and just die on their own, everyone goes, he's bloody entered the game again. It's like, if he didn't do that, he wouldn't do the brilliant plays. That is the other side of the coin. Like, people have to understand, they know the concept that junglers coin flip scenarios. They don't seem to get that, like, picks can be a coin flip. Like, if you fuck it up and you don't know where they are in the fog or what, like, that's actually, you're basically just engaging into a fight. They win at that point in time. That's what a pick becomes. So, like, I've always felt like there's certain narratives they go way too ham on, because we all know when Hylissang's on his game, look what he did against fucking TES. When Mickey X does get those picks like he was in the groups, that's what makes you never out of a game. So I think people were way too like quick with their analysis on this one. There was a lot of like nuance in this series, I thought. So let's get into it. Come on, Jensen, where do you want to
go? Do we do this game by game? Because before we go into that, I actually want to talk about the way that Damwon's gaming, the way that Damwon played, and the whole idea of what went wrong with Korea in the previous few years, right?
Yes.
Because the sad thing for me is that for the people in the Korean scene, they're gonna watch this game, and the reasons why the Korean teams lose to G2, it didn't show up. So I still think they won't learn their lesson. So, and here's the thing. So I'm not sure how familiar Monty is with what happened in season 8, right? Because he was kind of busy in a different world over there. But here's an interesting take, right? That the biggest lie told about why Korea is in a decline is that people talk about division changes to the warding trinkets.
Tracker's knife and all that shit. Yeah.
The Tracker's knife for the jungler, right? And at the same time, there was another extremely big change that was happening, I believe, in season 8, which is when all of this, what I would call the modern day macro of League of Legends started to happen, which is the way minions function in the side lane changed a lot, very significantly. So in the past, what would happen is that you always talked about the Koreans, they used the 6-man, and then they would manage the waves on the side lanes very well. So you always had to be answering the neutral wave, which is the mistake that the Korean teams are making today. Because if you answer that wave, then you group for an objective. The opponents will now be forced to choose as the wave will crash back into them. Am I going to lose 300 gold as I lose 2 to 3 waves as the wave stacks back into the opponent? Or am I going to defend the objective? But now if you just push that and you just push the wave, it just goes one bound deeper, right? This is what I call one bound. So it goes like, say, from neutral to right behind the tier 1, and then the wave gets stuck there. And neither side is actually losing gold. It's just that both sides are not farming that wave of resources.
Right. Okay.
So the value of answering the neutral wave has gone down very drastically. So in the past, it was super important to always set the side lane waves, but now as long as you're able to push it out, as long as you're able to it's all about maintaining your position on the map, right? And if you choose to touch the neutral wave, then you find yourself in a very extended position, because that's the furthest point away from the mid lane, and then you can find yourself stranded on the map. And we saw this G2 abusing this lots of it in 2019, not just against the Korean teams, but against C9 as well. And when I was in the OPL as well, there's always lots of like Korean influenced people who will come and say, oh, this is how you're going to play the game. And my players are telling me that this is what the previous coaches were telling them because they watch LCK. And you always have to be farm efficient, right? You cannot let the wave go, or else you're losing farm on the map. And as a result, this is why I think Korea's macro, in terms of like comparing the big 3 teams, the big 3 regions of LPL, LEC, and LCK, is actually has got the worst stake in the mid game right now. Because when they're behind on the map, you will always see top laner defending on the weak side, mid laner going to the strong side of the map, and they're just picking up these waves and just pushing out. And then you can see the LPL teams collapse on them. You can see the EU teams collapse on them.
I think there's another factor too, which is that the addition of turret plates really prioritized early game laning as well, because basically when the Korean teams were dominant, there weren't really the turret plates allow you, if you win your lane, to kind of snowball off that advantage to even get a larger gold advantage than you would have had previously. And also, I think this season, at least, the elemental dragons as well provide a way for teams to force a team fight where they really couldn't force it before in the same way. Because, you know, the risk of the dragon, like if you're fighting for a dragon soul, basically, like the dragon isn't going to do that much damage to you, so you can kind of really just sit on it forever, even when it's been aggroed, and you're not going to get super chunked out. Whereas if you're sitting on the Baron, you're going to take significantly more damage, and also it's way harder to kill. So it's just going to take you a lot longer. So I think right now there's a way for teams to force timings. Now, obviously, with the elemental dragons being new, I don't see that more of a legacy issue, but I do get what you're saying. And I think also the turret place probably had something to do with it as well, because, you know, the Korean teams were never prioritizing laning really in their dominance. Like, it was a factor, but basically macro play and proper map movement and team compositions and playing out team comp objectives was a much more important thing. Whereas what's happened as a result of what you're saying is that more early game gold, the acceleration of early game gold, and then not necessarily needing these kind of mid to late game waves, because you're talking about the waves that are basically building after a certain turrets go down. So it's the long lanes, just to be clear for everybody who didn't understand, it's the long lanes that are generating these massive waves. And there's a way, like if you see somebody who's going to be farming that wave, at their tier 2 or inhibitor turret, well, then the other team knows that there's plays that can be made elsewhere on the map, right? But the other thing is team comps, I would argue, are less important than they used to be, because if you get an early laning advantage, you can overcome some of the deficiencies within your composition just with golden items.
Basically what TES did the whole year. Like they would have some ridiculous drafts, but if like 2 or 3 lanes win, like what do you want?
Yeah, and so now it doesn't matter so much. I mean, team comps still matter, and win conditions still matter, right? But they matter a lot less than they used to when it comes to compositions and drafting, and so much more of it is about the laning phase and what you can do with that. Would you agree, Jensen?
I think there's a few ways to look at it, right? Like, it depends of what these win conditions are. So, there are ways where you can construct things around what I think people call the synercoms, where you really play this very early game centric compositions where you end up requiring to take this lead so that you can get a advantageous position on the map. And the way that these type of thing compositions work is that they tend to be very loaded in terms of like single target burst damage. So it's like Renekton Elise, lots of single target burst damage, right? And then what you need to do is to be able to translate that lead, get that goal lead, and translate it to a map pressure lead so that you're able to rotate between lanes and find manpower advantages and dive people. So you're not necessarily playing towards team fighting around the big neutral objectives, but you're trying to really snowball off a dive into a repeat dive into taking a turret, then rotating to mid, and just having this cascading wave of destruction onto your opponent of sorts.
I also want to throw out there, because I know this came up last year, and I have to correct the record. I've already complained before about how people basically were riding G2 side and win the finals of Worlds. But I'll reiterate it a different way. You know, when everyone was saying, like, it's just a consensus, like, LEC is the better region than LCK. Don't really get that. Like, G2 was better than LCK. I can have a brilliant discussion about that. In what world was Fnatic and Splice last year better than the Korean teams? Like, spoiler, they didn't place ahead of them. Last year, all 3 Korean seeds won their groups and got to the playoffs. This year, all 3 Korean teams got to the playoffs. One of them is probably about to win Worlds. Like, put it this way, there's only 1 Korean team left, and Damwon, I'm going to guess most people are probably going to predict is going to win, right? If Damwon wins, does that mean LCK is back on top again? Of course it doesn't. They're an outlier. Like, we all know Gen G just got their ass spanked by this team. No one knows what DRX would have done, but quite frankly, despite what people said in scrims, they looked bad on stage. They looked like they had some issues. So people need to stop doing this thing where you take what is by definition the outlier and say that leads the pattern. When you do a pattern like that and you draw the line through the graph, you take the one up here and you ignore it because it actually will make you less able to do the average. So I would say this. In my opinion, it goes like this. To touch on what Jensen said before, I think in terms of understanding of macro and how to win the game, LEC is ahead of LCK because I see the same problems from everyone except Damwon. That's why I told people coming into this tournament, you'll know the people who didn't watch LCK if they think that these are just 3 teams like last year. Like Damwon is a different beast, especially what they can do early. And then secondly, I'll also throw this in as well. In the same sense as the LEC's ahead like that though, you know all those complaints that we get yearly that go like this? Why is every bloody top 20 worlds list full of these Asian players? Much of a Korean dick suck. It's like the old argument, right? That's the reason why. Think about it. If they're strategically worse, but they're better in results, going to need something to be better there, aren't I? So how about the players? Like, I made this point when I watched the semi-finals. You hear people make these excuses for Western players like, well, it's only his first world, so how could you expect it, right? Go and have a look at that guy Ghost. He was considered, in theory, the worst player on the team earlier this year. He's a brand new player to the team, and he was just fucking chilling while just spanking asses in the semi-final. Yeah, the Juan Fung guy is looking like an MVP of the whole tournament. In fact, you know what? That's the trend in history. In history, if you're a banger from the Asia region, there are certain ones who don't make it. Like, you know what? Knight wasn't as crazy as everyone thought. I'll totally take that on the chin. Name, classic example. There's always the Dade Award winners. But what people ignore is it happens by default with Western teams. Whereas actually, that's not even an expectation. So in my opinion, listen, we can have all sorts of great discussions, but don't try and push the idea that like Europe has like better players than Korea. Child, please. That is nonsense. They can bring in subs that are bangers for fuck's sake.
All I'm going to say is look what the European rookies did at Worlds this year. Mad Lions, compared to what some of the Asian team rookies have done who have never played at a Worlds before, right?
Absolutely. That was just by the by, anyway. Right, back into this series. Okay. What do you actually think? Because I can't remember. We didn't have a show last week, did we, Monty?
No, we didn't, because I was making my way out to London and making sure everything was up here. So sorry, we didn't miss the show last week.
What were your expectations coming in? Because I actually technically don't know who you had winning these matches and what your expectation. We didn't have a show.
Yeah, I mean, we talked in the previous show before we did the quarterfinals that we thought the JDG Suning match was going to go to 5 and was going to be extremely close. That was, I think, clearly the most difficult one to predict out of all of these. And I think in some ways, Suning has really benefited by the fact that they were playing other LPL teams, because there were just wacky LPL versus LPL things that happened, especially in this matchup, where it's like suddenly Lee Sin is a first pick blue side champion, which doesn't line up with anything else that we've seen teams picking in this tournament. And I don't think either of these teams would do if they were against a different opponent. And this has always been true of the LPL. It's like when you get the China versus China match, like everything kind of just goes up in flames and it gets really bizarre and you get more bizarre results. Not to say that Suning couldn't have made it to the finals otherwise. They've done a great job of basically upsetting every single team that they've been up against so far in this tournament. But I think I would have predicted top again. In fact, even when top was down 2-1 in this series, I was like, I'm still pretty sure top is going to win this series as we were heading into game 4. So credit to Suning that they managed to pull it out. I'm sure we will be getting into that later in the show. Now, on the other side, I was pretty sure Damwon was going to win, but I at least hoped that it would be a competitive series. I just didn't think that, given the meta and the form of the players that we had seen from G2 compared to Damwon, that it was really that possible for G2 to win. Because, frankly, like, Damwon's looked extremely strong in every single position, and Jankos has had his up and down games. He doesn't really seem comfortable in this meta. I think we saw a lot of weakness from him on the meta junglers. Like that Kindred that we watched in the semis wasn't amazing. And I think you compare that to the solo lanes in the jungle of Damwon, and basically G2's hope was that somehow their bottom lane would get super far ahead. But when you can't kill them because they have a Leona in the bottom lane and they're playing a bunch of utility AD carries, I think it becomes a lot harder to do that. So, in a world where your bot lane kind of has to win it for you, and the meta carry or the meta ADCs are like Ashe, Jhin, Ezreal, I think there's a lot less kind of playmaking potential with those champions or ways that you can really dominate on the map. And I think that when you have Canyon on the other side, who just gets to play Graves and Kindred the entire series, you're going to have a lot of issues.
Right, that's one area where I wanted to actually like steer the conversation. I want to get Jensen in on this, which is what Monty's setting up there is actually what I thought ended up being the fundamental biggest mistake G2 made, which is they already in the draft were going to have a nightmare, because we know there's certain picks that if you give the mid to top side of Damwon, it's just game over. Like they're just too good on them. So I already wondered, I kept saying on Twitter, I hope they just do wacky drafts, just do something crazy they've never seen before, because if you play the meta drafts, I don't know how you're going to win it. But it actually felt to me like, G2 did that thing where when they win a series, they'll always admit, because it's partly banter, but it's also kind of crazy. It shows what insane mental strength they have. They'll always admit, like, oh, we were getting dumpstered in scrims. Like, yeah, we didn't even think we could beat the team, but we did. Fuck. How do we do that, eh? Like, the problem with that is that's baller if you then win, because what it implies is you actually don't look at the scrim result and say, right, the scrim result means I can't win. You just go, right, that's what happened that time we played them. But you know what? Every day is a new day. You play them again. I don't think that that's the mentality they had coming into this series. Their mentality sounded like they just heard what you said from the future now, Monty, in like a time portal. And they were like, oh, fuck, we've got to win hard through bot lane. It's the only way we can win. And it's like, whoa. Listen, if you ask me who's better right now, Wonder and Caps or Shigomake and Naguri, yeah, I'm giving it to the Koreans. But I'm not just giving that up. Like, I'm not saying, right, they're garbage. No, we can still win games through these guys. Like, it looked as though they believed they had to hard go through bot, and they never got that fucking going, by the way. Like, the idea that they were going to win bot, like, that just didn't even happen. So in my opinion, they sort of shot themselves in the foot. Like, I wish they could run it back and just play like they didn't know what the other team's strengths were and just play G2 style, What do you think, Jensen? Do you have any take on this angle?
I definitely do, and I think it's not necessarily just playing through bot, right? It's Jankos playing the farming junglers, which is the criticism that they had in the group stage, and then when they won against Genji, then they had the statement, oh, actually, Jankos can play these farming junglers as well. But you look at the Asian teams and their understanding of how to set up for these junglers, it's just so different from the way that G2 does it, right? Like let's just talk about the draw from the first game, right? They first pick Lucian, and then they go Lilia Renekton. So the idea here is that, and then the opponent locks in Hecarim. So the moment you see Lilia versus Hecarim, this should be the matchup. I mean, I don't want to criticize people who are sorry. I don't want to sound like I know more than these people who are at the semifinals, but at least this is my understanding of it. Once you see Lilia versus Hecarim, the Hecarim will run over the Lilia if you don't get the lead early on. So it has to be about facilitating this farming junglers, and you have to play like SOFM, right? You have to be going in, you have to be eating the Raptors, you got to be eating its camps, and you need to be able to secure push in the lane, and or at least be able to go for level 1 shenanigans. And they go for on the 4-5 bans. I don't recall what they banned, but I was there thinking, okay, you've got to ban Gangplank, you've got to consider banning maybe Jace as well. Volleyball was already banned on 1-2-3 at this point of time. So it ended up in a situation where the Lilia was just farming, and then the Hecarim just came online, and they never really got that rolling. They didn't really understand what this matchup was like. And I think when we look at Game 3 as well, when Mickey X was playing the Pantheon, the way that they were setting up for things, it really looked like they were trying to set up with the likes of a Lee Sin, with the likes of a set of Volibear, champions that have got a lot more, they can get in your face and have a much stronger upfront burst. But Jankos was playing Kindred instead. I think I'm thinking about the point about if I do recall, it's about 10 minutes into the game where we see Mickey X use the Pantheon ulti into the bottom lane, then just run it down in that scenario. So I do think that fundamentally G2, they didn't really learn the full gamut of how to play this farming jungler playstyle. So they try to play too much towards the meta, and that kind of like messed with them, I guess. Like at Worlds, it's always a logistical issue, right? Like you've got limited scrims, you're under lots of pressure. How do you allocate your scrim time accordingly? What do you try to learn, and how do you try to adapt to the meta? And I think for a team like G2, who have always tried to like adapt and like progress throughout the tournament, they might have bought into that hype a little bit too much.
Also, brother Mickey, listen, love you, bro, but if there's one region I wouldn't try the Pantheon support in, probably the one where they invented it. Just going to put that out there, my dude. Like, they probably have an eye. It's a bit like the lesson Bjergsen had to learn with, like, Zillion. Like, they know how to play against that. That's not something they're afraid of, I'm afraid, dude. Like, that is some crazy pick like that. Oh, my God.
You know, I do want to talk about Damwon's comp in Game 1 because I actually fucking love this composition. And I didn't think that there was a lot of discussion about how cool this composition is or how many ways it can work on the broadcast. And what I really enjoy about it is because how the hell do you even fight Damwon's comp if you're G2 around objectives? Because here's the thing. If you are separated at all, you're dead. Basically, because the engage is so severe from Damwon. So like if you're coming around kind of into the river and you're split or you're trying to flank, you don't have any hope, because remember, the Jin W procs off of any form of damage on the team. So Gangplank ult can set Jin up for it. And then the thing is, once the Jin W roots you, well, here comes the Hecarim, here comes Leona stuns, here comes TF porting in with the gold card. And what's crazy is when you have the TF who can also port in to set up Jin Ws, it's like, it's so gross, guys. Like, you look at this and it's just absolutely terrifying, the number of ways they can CC you from distance and then close the gap to continue CCing you. So you can't get anywhere close to this unless you're like basically a death ball if you're G2. And if you're a death ball with this composition that they have, you've lost. Like there's short range engage. You're going to get hit by a ton of Hecarim AoE. You're going to get poked out by a Jin ult. There's going to be a Twisted Fate TPing behind you, taking AoE from the Gangplank. So like this is a really nasty compositional advantage that I see from Damwon here. And I think that was probably like one of the major factors, because if you don't get ahead early, if that Hecarim farms up and this Damwon comp starts being around objectives, there's nothing you can do. It's just over, basically.
I think it was very interesting the way they set up the draft, right? Because Lucian was basically the OP, was the castle win of this Worlds effectively. So they opened up the Lucian, and then they had a very clear plan as to what they were trying to bait with it. So G2 first picked Lucian and it's like, okay, we have picked Lucian, that's supposed to go mid lane, and we want an AP jungler, so they picked up the Lilia, who has it's a very unique playstyle to play around the Lilia. So they force G2 to like, okay, we're gonna give you Lucian, then you have to play the Lilia, and that puts you into a zone that we know that you're not comfortable with, because these champions are not it's not the TF, it's not the champions where G2 is really good at punishing these Korean teams with.
And by the way, there's another example of where fans here's the key thing you need to understand if you're going to analyze games. And I'll be honest, because I don't know League of Legends as in depth, I don't try to do it normally like this. You got to know what happened before the person was in the situation where they fucked up. So what he's talking about there on the draft there is obviously the logic was the Lucian was going to be a mid lane champion, wasn't it? Like that is where it has been very strong. So when Perks takes that Lucian, I don't want to hear a single word about Perks in this game. That means, hello, Caps, you've just gotten your champion, my dude. Time to pop off. Yeah. Don't go, because this is what they always do. And mid lane is the worst role for it. It's the reason why, in my opinion, mid lanes have the longest career. A mid laner is the best role to not look like the guy who threw the whole game in. You can always look half decent at the mid lane. Meanwhile, the guy elsewhere who sacrificed on your team, he's just getting his shit pushed in, and then the fans go, fire that guy. It's like, mate, how about Caps if he wants that Lucian to be taken? That's your responsibility, my dude. You have to know that they can play counters into it. You have to be able to play those. That's part of asking for your pick. Now, it might not be him who did it, in which case it's Grabs who fucked up. But the point is, someone's got to carry the can on that. And it isn't the guy, because I've seen Wunder and Perks do this before. They're the ones basically saying, I'll take up the slack for you. Like, that can't be the guy who then gets like, oh, why didn't you carry on it? It's like, mate, Lucian, this isn't fucking season 4. Like, why is that going to carry the bot lane? What are you talking about?
I also just don't even understand why they didn't run the Lucian in mid lane here. Yeah. Because, it almost seems to me that Caps' attitude, this is purely speculative, was like, pick me the Sylas so that I can match TF ults. And like, he was like trying to just neutralize Showmaker. He's like, it's a big dick move, basically just slapping his dick on the table and saying, yes, I will go head-to-head with Showmaker, and I'll show up too with his Sylas when he ports in. But that's like really risky.
I mean, let's be real. Caps was in love with Sylas this whole tournament. Like, obviously, he was looking sick against Gen G. Yeah, I'm with you on that. But like, in this series, it didn't really do anything, did it? What do you think, Jensen? Like, what do you think of this pick at the moment? Because I feel like the problem with the Sylas is, I get why like G2 or TES pick it sometimes, but that's because their logic is, I just have the best players in the world.
It's a big
Let's see if I can start. I think as an actual pick in terms of like trying to draft, like it's fucking really hard to make that work sometimes.
I think the Sylas in the TF matchup is fine, but you have to look at what your jungler is, right? So when TS did it, they had Lee Sin, which is a ganking jungler. The way the lane dynamic works between Sylas and TF is that the TF plays kind of like, he's the range champion, plays the pokes out of the matchup. As Sylas, you're playing the all-ins out of the matchup. So as the Sylas, you want to call the jungle pressure, you want to call the jungle attention, and you pick Lilia, who is in the Hacker matchup right now, and what the leader really wants to be doing is to be farming and invading. And now as Sylas, you can't get pushed by yourself in lane. You don't get the support. You're double AP in the mid lane. The Merc threats get so much value, and Magic Resist gets so much value in the mid lane in general. So I have to wonder what was the thinking there, right? Did they just panic, or did they just look at it and say, okay, we've dropped ourselves into a corner. We want some battle tools to win the game right now. So let's go for the Sylas here, so that we have another way to maybe flip the game in a team fight. Because the thing about Sylas is that if he wins a fight and he gets a bunch of shutdowns, he can actually become a very strong scaling threat. And they did have some very strong ultimates, right? They had Hackrim ultimate, so that's probably what they were looking at once they felt that they were drafted into a corner. Once they saw Gangplank on 4, so I think that at a point of time it might have been okay, this draft is kind of lost. What can we pick here to kind of like gamble the game? And maybe Sylas was the I feel like I can carry on this champion. Let's flip some fights with Sylas and maybe we can win this game.
I think we should move on to game 2, because that was the one that G2 actually managed to win and gave me some level of hope for this series. It was, I'm not exactly sure what Damwon was thinking here. I think it's curious because it does go back to the 1-3-1 that we were discussing in terms of their typical or kind of fallback style. But for me, the Fiora pick so late in this draft, it felt like the same kind of thing, because if you remember, you have to always think about the players' attitudes when they're going into this series. And the way that I was surprised to see Damwon just like spamming the emotes and really trying to like dig into G2 in game 1.
Usually they were trying to style in game 2, didn't it?
So usually, guys, it's not common to see teams that try and style or like BM people in the first game of a best of 5, because that can come back on you real fast.
Of course.
And if you start to go the other direction, it can tilt you even harder. So I was really surprised by Dom Juan just going so hard on G2 in the first game of the series when it came to BMing them. And so to me, it felt... It's not that the Fiora can't win, and indeed, like, you know, if you snowball that, it's a super snowball-y matchup, the Fiora versus the Camille, because once one of them starts to get ahead, then it can translate into, you know, overwhelming side lane pressure. So it's not like a joke pick or a BM pick or anything like that, but it is a style pick. And in the same way that it kind of felt to me that Caps was like, okay, I'm going to big dick this guy in the first game, it kind of felt to me that Nagari was saying, like, I'm going to big dick Wonder in game number 2.
Thoughts, Jensen?
I actually felt that the draft was an interesting approach to it, right? Like the way that they set up for things, and in fact, when I was watching most of the game, I felt that actually Dom Gaming was actually going to take this game 2 as well, because the
it was
entire
close.
Time,
like you look at the Fiora scoreline, it doesn't tell you that Fiora was very close to actually being ahead in that game.
Because the Fiora just exerted so much pressure, and if I went back to my original analysis that G2 wins if they can get any position on the map by sacrificing objectives, right? So if Damwon overgroups for an objective, then G2 can get a position on the map, then they can set up for a cheese in the bush and stuff like that. Then I think that's how they can win games against Damwon, or they can get the 2-lane collapse against the 3-lane opening from Damwon. But with the Fiora, it always meant that Damwon would always be pushing out the side lanes, and it's G2 who has to constantly respond to these pushes. Now there were some mistakes from the Fiora, I think, especially when he got caught in the bot lane when he engaged into the Camille over there. But I think in general, I felt that this game was very close, and I thought it was a very interesting adaptation from Damwon to approach G2 style in general, because especially to go for Camille, to go for the Fiora into the Camille, I think it's also might be a mind game thing, right? He just wants to show one to his better top laner as well, based on mind games with him over there. And he did say in the interview that this is something that he has been thinking about, and he has practiced quite a fair bit as well.
I also think that this is one of those times where if you're Dom Juan and you're very confident you're going to win this series, you want to start to sow the seeds of doubt for any possible opponents that you have in the final. And if you show this pick, now that's something that your opponents have to think about when they're heading into the finals, right? That you perhaps have this counter pick ready in terms of the Fiora, not counter pick, but like you want to play the Fiora into the Camille, like you want to take on this dominant matchup where you can really snowball the side lane if your team helps you out with it. So I wonder how many mind games they were trying to play there based on what you just said, Jensen, about their attitude towards the pick in terms of their interviews. One of the factors,
especially because the LPL also was the region where there was a billion possible counter picks in top lane and everyone had champion oceans. And obviously, if you're Damwon, think about how these teams practice. You scrim the other side of the bracket. You're literally expecting, based on the order of this, I'm going to be playing top. The team I've been essentially looking at on the horizon the whole year. So I'm trying to think, like you're saying, okay, 369, you have to at least consider this when we play this series, not just going to play everything we played before, bro. Like, I agree that there's definitely some mind games going on. I know fans would think, you wouldn't do that, though. You're in the middle of a match. It's like, if you're the favorite, you have to do both simultaneously. That's why it's so complicated in this game, because this isn't like my game, Counter-Strike, where you can just be the best and you can iterate what you did before again. If you execute it perfectly, you win. Like, in this game, you have certain aces. It's like the game Trumps. You don't blow all your trumps instantly. You save a couple of them. You bait someone into one. You play one at the end. Like you have to simultaneously be peaking through the tournament, but you can't go all in on the semi in case you blow everything for the final. Like, I know fans are going to think that's just like movie shit. I think that's real though. Like, I mean, you've been a coach, Jensen. There is something to this where you have to like take into account today's opponent, but also if you get to the next round, you can't show everything, right?
I think there's something that we can talk about more when we talk about Suning as well, because this is something that the coach, he used to be called Fluid Win, and he coached the Flash Wolves, right? And he would always say on his stream, which is in Mandarin Chinese, and he always talked about this topic, right? What do you want to show during the regular season itself when people live up at a point of time? I believe it was Maple's Oriana. You have to take it, right? Because you have to force them to respect your
Right.
work ethic, even if that means giving over the likes of a LeBlanc or Syndra. I don't recall what the exact meta was at that point of time. And this was a topic that he focused on quite a fair bit. How do you control information as the tournament progressed? And I think that this was very relevant in 2019 when FTX, they basically said, okay, we're going to play this chill in the group stages. We're just going to show you guys, yeah, we're going to like play the Kai'Sa, play the Vayne in the bot lane, and everybody can haha LWX into the Kai'Sa. But people who watch the LPL, they would know that the mid into the bot style where they choke people up with the Varus, that would be their ammo, right? That is actually their A strategy. That's the better strategy. They showed that in the quarterfinals, they showed the Rumble in the semifinals, and they didn't have to show anything else for the finals against G2. But we saw that progression, and every time they brought out something,
saving it for this world. By the way, if we're going to go on to the other series, because obviously we can do that now, we'll circle back on down one for the final. I want to just say this. Sunning is the ultimate example of where like fans were both wrong and right. Like coming into Worlds, you could tell all the people who hadn't watched LPL because they were like, this team will do absolutely nothing. It's like, well, that's not true. They're clearly a dark horse. They've got some skills. They have some young players. Like as long as they hold it together mentally, they're going to have a shot. Now, I will say I picked JDG and Top to beat them because of how the regular season went. But that's the point where the fans then, we all know the way fans are. The same fan who before was like, they could never do anything. All of a sudden, it's like, I am from the Church of Sunning. They are the gods. How can you ever pick against them? Like, that's also where you've gone too far the other way, guys. Because one of the things I thought all the LPL analysts and casters were making an extremely good point about on their tweets and their videos is this is not the Sunning that played in the LPL. Like the Sunning that played in the LPL, then they wouldn't have beaten JDG. This team genuinely, from group to quarterfinal to semi, potentially to final now, if they can do something in that final, they're one of the few teams, I think it was Kelsey said this on Twitter, they're one of the few LPL teams that has come into a world and just like evolved the whole time. Like they're leveling their shit up. They're figuring out how to play the game. They're even figuring out how to beat the opponents they never would have beaten if that was the LPL playoffs and they were in a final, in a semi-final. Like, what did you think, Jensen? You're obviously familiar with these teams.
I actually think that the Sunning series is actually impossible to predict because it really depends on who starts in red side, right? I really think that do the teams determine who gets side selection by coin toss, or is there some other system to determine it? I do believe it's a coin toss for semis, right?
For semi, well, I think because they were both #1 seeds out of their groups, that it would have been determined by coin toss, I believe.
Right.
If one of them had been a #1 seed and one of them had been a second seed out of groups, I believe the first seed would have gotten preference. That should be the way it runs.
So when I look at the JDG game, I actually predicted Sunning to win that because I knew that they were coming in as the first seed and they could choose red side. Although they kind of chose blue, and then they won, but in the end they still won 2 games on red side and 1 game on blue side. Because the way that this team sets up and with the way the meta is at the moment, red side is just so valuable for this team. And when I was approaching the semis, it's like there's no way I predict this unless I know I can get an accurate prediction on this unless I know who's going to be choosing red side in the first game, right? And we can see red side priority went up a lot in semifinals as compared to quarterfinals, where for some inexplicable reason everybody was choosing blue side in the scenario, right? Because especially for Bin, this is a guy, and I think for the finals as well, it really might be determined as to who wins the coin flip and who gets to choose red side in that case. And I really think in the series against TAS as well, Top Esports, if TAS wins the coin flip and they start on red side, we might have seen a very different result. Because if they are 2-1 up in game 3 going to game 4, I don't think they lose their nerve in the way that they did, right? Because we saw game 1, what they last pick? Top lane. Game who won? Sunning last pick top lane, they won. Game 2, TAS last pick top lane, they won. Game 3, Sunning last pick top lane, and they won that. And then now that TAS were down 2-1, they probably went to some panic mode, and then they said, okay, you know what, let's simplify things, and all of a sudden you see them blind picking Ornn. And what did Sunning get at blue side? Last pick for top lane. They played the Jax, they got pressure in the lanes, they set up for the comp well, and then they won the series off of that. If TAS starts on red side, and then we see them go up 2-1 instead, I think this might have been a different series, because we would see it might have gone to 5 games, or you really can't tell what happens, right? But I felt that Sunning, I initially when I did my video on the semifinals, right, I look at the tools that Sunning had, I felt that they didn't have enough tools to break surf, right? Because now if we say the red side is going to win every single game, then who has got the better tools on blue side to break that dynamic? And I felt that TAS had the better setup to break the dynamic on blue side if they played a tank at the top lane, a mage in the mid lane, and an enchanter support. With such a setup, then you can play to a stacking Drakes, and you have the scaling team fight. You have a very strong composition that you can create for the scaling team fight around the soul point or around the Baron near to 30 minutes. But in what we saw from Suning on blue side was very impressive, right? They started to innovate. They put out they showed that they could play Ornn. It's slightly unfortunate that they lost the game. So I felt that overall, in terms of like preparing for the series and coming in, Suning, they time after time, right? They have constantly improved. Against JDG, they picked up the gangplank to break serve on blue side, and against TAS, they picked up Ornn, although they did lose that game. So now this is a team that's been banning Ornn in their first 3 bans every single game up to this point, and all of a sudden, holy shit, Ornn is in the champion pool, right? So if you're talking about mind games and draft, I really think that this is a team that Damwon and their coaching staff are going to be looking at as like, okay, what should we really be expecting from them? And then it plays that whole area of uncertainty is like, do they have an additional pick that they're going to surprise us with for the finals?
By the way, I just want to say as a quick interjection, like this is why I personally, for broadcasts, believe you should do predictions, because for the most casual fan possible, it's just fun. Like they want to know, okay, listen, you sounded smart there, you gave away reasons, but where are you putting your money? Like which one would you go? That's just what they want. They want an answer, right? But the people who treat that like it actually means anything, think about it. League has got to have the worst predictions in the world. You just pick like 3-1, 3-2. Like there's no information there. What are you talking about? Like, and the worst thing about it is not only, like you're saying, do you not know any of the drafts? You don't know any of the champions they actually will choose to pick when you're making a prediction. But even worse, like you're saying here, at certain worlds, which side you start on is important. We don't even know that either. Like that's why people, listen, have fun with it, but don't take it seriously if you get the principle. That should be like the through line on predictions.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting point that you bring up, Jensen, too, because throughout this series, or throughout both of the semis, the only time that we saw kind of the top lane pick, the top laner who picked first as opposed to counter picking the top lane win was when G2 beat Damwon when they picked the Fiora. And for me, if you look at every other game in the semi, Camille was banned in every single other game. So that was a game that, again, going back to it, felt kind of like Damwon was saying, okay, well, we want to show that we have some sort of answer to Camille to like introduce that level of doubt into the rest of this series and then potentially the finals as well, presuming they would go on to that. And the only other time there wasn't a counter pick was when Damwon took the Lulu before they had seen the top lane, but that was a support flex. And also was super good with their composition overall because they already knew that they were going to be able to kind of superpower, the damage champions that they had already picked up in that game. So it wasn't the true tell, and they could have always pivoted back to selecting a different top lane champion once they saw the Sion. And indeed, I don't think G2 thought that Lulu was going top when they picked the Sion in that game. So I do think that there's a lot of interesting stuff to unpack there, especially to look for the finals when it comes to who is going to be counterpicking whom and the kind of the value of blind picks. The other trend that I thought was pretty interesting, especially in the Suning top series, was Angel's picks. Because for me, this guy is like, I do want to talk about him for a few minutes because for me, he is really like the key to this final going well for Suning. And he has such a different champion pool than Showmaker and such a different kind of style. If we look at his overall picks, I might have thought that he was playing in Worlds last year because so far in this tournament, he's been focusing on champions like Galio, Zoe. I mean, these are picks that would have been very popular towards the end of Worlds. And, you might associate it with FPX or teams that like to play, even Cloud9 in the Spring Split and LCS, that like to play very mid-roam heavy styles. And they also have the Syndra coming in there. And that accounts for what? Something like 10 of their, 15 games at Worlds so far are those three champions. And sure, the Akali's been dangerous. Angels won both of the games and looked very, very good on that Akali. So I think you just take that out right away. But what's fascinating is there was almost this little draft minigame developing over the course of this series, which is that Knight is going to blind pick Orianna. Okay, that happens in game one. Then the Azir is picked by Suning. So by the time we get the blind pick Orianna pick in the final, in the fourth game, well, Azir's already been banned, so top doesn't want to play that, and then it's the Akali that comes in. So I really wonder what happens if the mid pool is more pinched for Suning. Because I want to know if he goes back to playing Galio or he goes back to playing Zoe, which I don't think are, I mean, they can work, but I don't think that they're the picks that are going to beat Damwon, right? Like, Showmaker's not going to get fucked up by that.
I think if I put it in context of the red side, blue side drops, right? I do think that Zoe and Galio are actually decent blue side approaches towards the game. If they say that, oh, okay, our approach towards blue side is we want to play to stack the Drakes, and especially Zoe is a champion that is very, very good for Drake number 2 and Drake number 3, because that's when she gets level 9 and she completes Ludo and Echo respectively, right? So that kind of tends to be her relative spike compared to the rest of the map when you get 5 points in the queue, and then you get the Luden's Echo for the huge amounts of burst. And we saw that in the second game against Test that they lost, right? They went in there and there's this Zoe just hard carrying these skirmishes. You land the bubble and then one guy's completely out of the fight, simply by the strength of the Zoe pick. But as compared to the likes of Oriana, once the Drake number 4 comes up, people complete 2 items, then you become very, very reliant on hitting the skill shots, whereas the Oriana or Syndra or whichever other champion that's in the meta becomes a much more reliable form of damage. So I think blue side, to put it in context, I think it's an interesting way to approach, like, how do you kind of break stuff on blue sides as a whole, on blue side, and get a kind of play a similar role as well, very strong around Drake number 2, Drake number 3, force the opponent to soul point and then try to take a fight there and win a fight there, or roll for an ocean soul and kind of win it on that. But I do think that he can show more, right? Because Angel is kind of known as a mage player. Syndra, I do believe Syndra has had a very high priority as a whole, but we see her more banned than pick.
Correct.
So it's not just Angel, but I do believe that mid laners as a whole, they have been, is something that people have been first picking.
Syndra was banned in 7 out of the 8 games, and the one game it wasn't banned, Showmaker played it and won for Damwon versus G2. 7 out of the 8 semis. Anyway, continue.
Yeah, so if they continue to pinch the mid lane pool, I don't really think they can pinch it enough, because there's a significant overlap, right? The Twisted Fate is something he plays as well. Lucian should still be the power pick. I would be very curious to see if Damwon, they do open up Lucian once again to try and test Suning on that. But I kind of doubt it. But pinching mid lane, it might be possible, but that would probably mean that they're trying to pinch them into a scenario that sets them up for a trap and draft, or sets them up for something where they've seen something in scrims and they know that Showmaker has got a very interesting counter pick prepared for it. But
by the way,
Oriana, something else. There's more than enough champions for Angel. Yeah, sorry. My point is that I think that there's more than enough champions for Angel, but I've got to go and look at the GOL, the GG to read all the match histories to get an accurate read on that.
Sure. One thing, like, listen, the obvious elephant in the room for this series is, right, listen, we'll get to some of the other aspects about top later, but the player who was the worst, listen, obviously, by definition, the worst player was the Yu Yanjia guy, because he's always been the worst. Like, but that was known already. Like, that was something they could actually live with and still be a favorite for Worlds. Nobody, and I'm talking nobody, could have anticipated this fucking playoffs from Jackie Love. Like, this was absurdly bad. Because people don't get it. I was one of the people, I made a video last year where he was on IG, where I said, people are overrating this guy on this level, which is, if you're the guy who plays with Rookie and the Shy and they smash their lanes, you can tell me stuff like, but I was pushing in my bot. Like, that doesn't matter, mate. They are magnets drawing people to them and drawing fights to them. Like, in that scenario, you are reckless in season 4. You are chilling, watching people win the game and going, shall I help them? He's got it. Actually, I can leave him and do that. Like, you don't have to carry everything. So then, when you do get a game that you carry and you look fucking sick, all the fans go, see, he's the best as well. And I was always like, whoa, 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 whoa. If you're comparing him to other AD carries and you play in a region with Uzi I, who Uzi I is the opposite. Uzi I in this analogy is the forgiven to the reckless. He's like, every game is on my back. Give me my champion. I'm going to 1v9. The difference is Jackie Love never had to do that. So now when he comes into this team, and he had a great impact on TS the whole year, if you've ever watched any of those voice comms, he shot calls the fucking team fights. I personally believe the only reason he keeps the Yu Yanjia guy in and makes... The reason I think they do those shit drafts with Tom Kench is just because he tells the Yu Yanjia guy, like, I'll tell you when to swallow me every time. Like, right, swallow me, not swallow me. Like that's just like his fucking like get out. That's like his parachute to jump out of the plane. Like he doesn't actually think that's a good pick or that's a good player. Like it's just a little bot that he has. Mate, this guy threw so many fucking games in this series. It was unbelievable. The whole playoffs he was, and so I know he has the talent to maybe be the best AD carry ever. His peaks look insane. But they didn't show up in these playoffs almost at all. Like, where do you come on this, Jensen? Because, like I said, there's plenty of problems with top we can get into, but that one was really glaring to me. Like, it's one thing if you didn't, like, outperform the other guy. He was, like, actively, like, a detriment at times, it felt like.
I think it's also kind of the way that the meta has evolved a little bit throughout the World Championship, where at the start it's all about, okay, bot lane priority is like super, super important, right? Because you want to be playing for the early Drakes, you want to be stacking the early Drakes, and the team that stacks the Drakes early tends to win. But as we saw in the series, and I think people are talking about it as well, is the curse of soul point, right? You get a soul point, and all of a sudden you find yourself getting outskilled, and people are starting to adapt to this meta as well, and they're going for the scaling team fight compositions, where it's a lot more important to secure the level 13 on your Ornn or your Gangplank or whichever scaling pick that you select in the top lane, and then be able to set up for them to win in these team fights, right? Like in the scenario in the first game where we had the Wukong against the Jace, and once you're playing for these type of scenarios, use the ability to push out bot lane to control the Drake, the ability to push out bot lane to contest for the Rift Herald, it goes down by a lot. So I think that's the change that happened as well, which is why we didn't see as big of a emphasis on being able to win bot lane, and that being such a big factor in the games itself.
I think some of these games, like, so first off, I have to preface this. I've never particularly liked Jackie Lowe as a player. He's
I mean, by the way, if people don't get it, Monty doesn't particularly like players that are really wild and just go too aggressive, right? Like you like a more controlled style.
I like it more consistency because I think it's hard to build a team style if you have super variant abilities within your own team.
Especially from AD carry, for one player. Like, you know, if we're picking one role, let's not have the AD carry be a guy who's just going all in, you know?
Especially like when you're ahead. I mean, it was kind of hilarious to watch him just like going over on Ezreal, just going over the dragon pit and just like straight inting into Suning, even in the game that top won in this series. I would be incredibly angry if I was his coach and saw that, considering the game state at the time and the fact that you really didn't want Suning to have any chance of getting back into that. And it just is completely unnecessary to make those kind of hero plays. And so my problem with having super high skill players that do have this level of variance is it's like you have to really hope that either in the case of when he was on IG, his solo lanes are just so incredibly strong that they can just carry no matter what he's doing in that bottom lane. And maybe you get some sick highlights sometimes, but it doesn't really matter overall. In which case, like, why not just get a normal AD carry?
Because it's IG, to be fair. So whatever.
It's not as cool, I guess. It's not as cool. You don't get the style points. But the problem is that when you are relying on this player to carry you, or then you get into this problem where some games he will, but some games he'll also just like totally tank it for your team. And what that does is it means you have to really roll the dice and say, okay, this guy is going to have the most insane tournament of his career where he never ints and he's just going to be at his peak the entire time. And that's the way we win worlds. Now, if I have a team with the skill level of top esports, I don't want to fucking roll those dice, dude. I've already got Knight and Karsa and 369. Yes. Like, I don't need this guy just doing weird shit in my lane and randomly losing the 2v2 in game 3. Because, I mean, Knight's best game of this series was probably game 3, where he was like popping off on the Echo. And I felt terrible for him because he's just trying to do damage control on this map where his side lanes were both just dying for no reason.
Same with Karsa as well, by the way. Karsa was in a fucking nightmare simulator right now playing this series. It's like, that's like playing solo queue when you're the jungler. Like, how the fuck am I supposed to put 3 fires out at once? Like, this is mental. No, I agree, Monty. Like, that was a great, you actually phrased it the best way. Like, why are you making hero plays that you don't have to? I think in general, one thing about top for me was there was sometimes times where you could tell pressure got to them because it's like, dude, you could just like calm down 10% and these games are all winnable. Like, why are you overreacting to this shit? Because it's like this classic quote, right, from back in the day when Kobe Bryant and Shaquille O'Neal used to play together. And there was obviously famously a very big power dynamic, right, which is because Shaquille O'Neal was in theory the best player in the whole NBA. His logic was like, let me be the one who's like the primary carry, as it were, and you can just be the secondary carry. And obviously the whole dynamic was Kobe Bryant was like, well, actually, I secretly could be the guy. And they were in this whole thing. So one time in the media, right, Shaq just said, the problem with Kobe is he kept trying to be a hero, and a hero ate nothing but a sandwich. And what he means by that is, like, in America, they call like a long sandwich like a hero, right? But his point that he was making is an apt one, which is you don't try to be a hero. Like, if you think it's like a movie every time, like, you're going to fuck the game up. It's like you're a hero when the moment presents itself and you embrace it. You don't, like, create the heroic moment every game. Otherwise, you're going to have a whole bunch of times where you're going to look like an idiot, aren't you?
That would be like Superman, like, lighting a skyscraper on fire and then saving people.
No, basically, yeah. Yeah, exactly.
Like, you wait for the skyscraper to be on fire, and then you save the people. Yes. You don't cause the disaster that you save people from. And that's a good point. That's like what I feel like when I watch Jackie Love, and it just pisses me off, honestly. I know people love him and they think he's great, and I appreciate that you're looking at those top moments, but just for me, like, I just fucking hate watching him play. And the other side of this too is this Juan Fung guy who's new this year, who I love watching play. I'm all into this guy. Not only from the awesome rags to riches, like, human interest angle that he has. I think it's really cool that people are telling that story, but I just love his like very calculated, controlled play. Yes. I love the way he plays Jhin. It's so smart. And Jhin is just a champion that is so wildly different from any other champion in League of Legends. He's one of my favorite champions in terms of design. And you can do so much with his kit if you are really thinking about how to use it from you don't even, it's one of those AD carries where you can do damage, but also the itemization, like, changes him so fundamentally, because when you start to get items, he starts to move a lot faster because he'll start proccing his crit. And when you have, like, the new rune system, the rune to mastery system with the fleet footwork, it makes him this very interesting champ that kind of, like, weaves in and out of battle. And, like, knowing when to use your ult effectively is very hard, because if you use it at the start of the fight, you can cause CC and some chip damage, but it doesn't do as much damage if champions have full health. So there's all these kind of different things that have to go on in your brain when you're playing Jhin. And the way you play him changes a lot when you get 2 items, when you get 3 items into the game. And so when I watch Juan Fung, I'm really impressed by the decisions that he makes, especially on these very hard to play champions that change so much from minute 1 until minute 30 in the game.
What do you think, Jensen?
Yeah, I think that Juan Fung, he has shown some weaknesses in the laning phase as well. But as much as we want to rag on Jackie Love, I think that Yuanxia is, I mean, we talked about Yuanxia earlier, like, being quite a trash can. I think that in the playoff series as a whole, I'm just looking at the way they're playing things and the way that they're setting up in 2v2s as well. He's playing Karma, he's sitting in the bush. You've got no, that's what you do when you're playing a champion like Trash and Nautilus, because you want to represent your hook threat, right? But he's playing Karma, he's sitting in the bush, where you should be just stepping forward up with your AD carry every time that there's a minion dying. You threaten trades from 2 characters at the same time, and it just feels that this guy's laning really isn't quite there. And I have to wonder how much of this is also affecting Jackie Love. And with regards to the whole hero play thing, could this be also like the whole the thing that you guys talked about, because it's LPL versus LPL, they 3-0 them last time, and when that 3-0 happened, when Tess beat Suning in the semifinals, it was from bot lane gap, right? Two out of the 3 games was them just absolutely smashing the living shit out of Juan Fung and Sword Art in the bot lane. So they might have bought in a little bit into the tough hubris, like, okay, we did this the last time, we're going to do the same thing this time, but they didn't have the understanding as to how to replicate what they did the first time around. And they just said, okay, we have the confidence, we're better than them, I'm just going to go in and I'm going to trust that I'm going to be able to outskill them. But that's not how the game works.
Well, one thing I saw on Twitter that Peter Dunn, obviously, like he's not technically the coach of Mad Lions, he was like the director of esports, one of those roles, a bit like when Young Buck was in Fnatic, where it's like you can sort of do some of the coaching, but you have a coach below you and you're more like half GM, half coach or something. So clearly you're influential to the team. He basically said on Twitter something along the lines that I thought was a great point, which is, right, when everyone always hypes Sword Art, the problem Sword Art has is he is very meta dependent.
Yes.
So if he can play those specific champions, we can all list them, the top 3 champions that he's the best at. He's awesome. He's like those players that, it's a bit like Ignar. Like, if Ignar gets his champions, great. Look at the impact he can have. If he has to play in a meta where it's not those champions, though, it diminishes them. They're like half as good a player. One of his points that he thought was the evolution of Sonning was they just went with it. They were like, listen, maybe we're not going to be able to just play all the best champions in the meta and have the best like LS style draft where it's like, wow, we won the draft. His logic was like, just give the right engaged champions to Sword Art, and whether that's the strongest champion or not, he's going to make more of it than he would forced, like, railroaded onto a meta champion. Did you have any thoughts on this, either of you two? Because I thought, actually, like, this is one of the things I actually love, at least about the modern day League of Legends, where you don't have to draft the same, like, by the numbers way that they do in, like, Season 5 or whatever. I love it when you have players where it's like, listen, this might not be the actual meta right now, but I'm just better on this champion, even if it's not as good a champion. I will do more with it than I would if I just have to play whatever the top 3 picks in the world are, you know.
I think it helps that Leona won literally every single semifinal game that Leona was played in. Super strong champion right now that is extraordinarily difficult for most of these team compositions to kill and has amazing engage capabilities, right? And a very, very strong laning presence. So I think that helps Sword Art a lot. And that's another point that I do have a bit of concern. Not that Beryl is like the best player on Dom 1. In fact, he might be the worst player on Dom 1. He's bottom 2 for sure, right? And I think he's weirdly limited in some ways if we were to look at that matchup going into the final. But I do think that Sword Art massively benefited from being able to repeatedly get Leona over the course of this series.
Mate, especially like if you saw him in the LPL, I'm pouring bleach into my eyes when I'm Sword Arts on fucking like Nautilus, like Tom Kenchik. I don't want to see that shit. Like, again, you buy a ticket to the Sword Art show to watch him play the other champions. What do you think, Jensen?
I do think that this can be a little bit of like where the narrative takes over as to what Sword Art's champion pool is like, because I do think that he can play quite a wide range of champions, but I think that Sword Art, you can make an argument that he's, in terms of like the tangibles, right, just from the eye test, he might be the worst player on Suning, but being the veteran player, I think he brings a very strong leadership. He's coordinating the team, and if you watch the voice comms for Suning, what the quality that this guy brings is he brings coordination. He's there to keep the rookies, the hit space of the rookies in place. And when they were playing, I think it was the mic check where they showed against JDG, I would show this to other players and say that this is what I expect from a veteran player when you communicate with your teammates in the game, right? Especially from a support's point of view, keep them in focus, keep them aligned on the win conditions and stuff like that. And maybe that's why it affects his play as well, because this is where his mental capacity has to be focused towards. He has to be the brains of the team. He has to be the one coordinating things as a whole. And it naturally makes it easier as well if he becomes a trigger puller as well, as compared to being something a bit more reactive like Tom Kench, right? Like for Yu Yuanjiao, who's might not be as big of a voice because Jackie Love is the one doing all the calling, then yes, you play the reactive champions, then you play around what your team is calling. But if you're in Sora's position, you're the main caller of the team, then it makes more sense to put you on the champions that can control the flow of the team fight, right? Leona, start the ulti, and the play on his call, go auto Q auto, then pull back from there. So he's the one who can control the flow of the team fight. So it's not just about this is his comfort champions, it's about what's the dynamic of the team and what does it mean to have these champions in relation to the dynamic as well.
Yes. Yeah, that's what I actually meant, by the way, as in he said like they drafted around giving him his champions. It was that premise, not just giving him the champion explicitly, but like make the comp around that. Yeah. One thing I wanted to get your take on, again, as someone who's watched the LPL, was another thing, like, put it this way, I'll do a very quick contrast. In the same way as if you're a Fnatic fan, you're now going to leave Worlds with the most delusional opinion about your team possible, because you're going to go, but they almost won. Wow, look at them against TS. They were number one favorite. And what you're going to do is you're going to take the high watermark and you're going to go, forget about all the rest of the summer. Yeah, awesome. Like, look how good they are. Well, now people are doing the same thing, but reversed with top esports. They're like, see, they were trash after all. Everyone overrated them. It's like one of the fundamental things about top was they could defy the whole meta exactly because if they gave the right champions to those 3 laners, they just fucking smashed the lane. Like, they're going to win. They're just going to get those leads. And as we mentioned earlier, like in the same way as that's why people were doing creative level 1s. It's like, it's not just a scenario where it's like LS's Ender's Game moment where it's like this draft beats this draft. It's like, well, actually, they have to play the game. It's like, you know, some humans come in now and like play those chapters. So like, it doesn't matter if your matchup beats me. If the other guy, what if at level 1 I flash early and then he fucking kills me? Well, now what happens to that matchup? LS 1 kills ahead and 1 has a night. Like, you know, you can see how it can change. So for me, top in the playoffs at least never even arrived. Like the top I saw in the LPL, and they never got here. So none of their strengths got activated for me. Like, what were your thoughts? Because I thought generally, aside from Knight, who had sort of like, he almost had like some ones where I don't even want to call them wins because they were like, he was like nuanced, sort of ahead in the lane, or he was like up in CS, or he had a couple of kills early, but just didn't have the pop-offs. Like, I know people are going to say, if you say the guy's the best player in the world, you've got to carry, which like, he didn't. But like overall, like the whole team generally was so underwhelming except for Carsa for me. Where do you come down on this, Jensen? Like, what did you see contrasted against the team that came in as the favorite?
I do think that it's a lot about how do you perceive strength in the game, right? Do you look at it from a lane-centric perspective where you say that, okay, these guys have, like you said, right? They are such good mid laners, a top laner, and a jungler that can facilitate the mid to top playstyle extremely well. And if we assume that these players are going to be able to create leads, then we can say that there is definitely strength in that. But when you talk about like which team is better and stuff, that is always a very difficult conversation because it's about how you measure these teams. But if you just look at the strengths and weaknesses, I think drafting as a whole was a question for top esports, and it's not even a meme, right? I think Knight meant it when he went up there and he had a famous screenshot of himself. Like, I don't even know how we win with these team compositions because I really do think like in one of the games, I think game 4 against Fnatic, most people look at
that. Oh yes, of course.
In the review as well, this is basically Nemesis just not pressing his buttons, which is why Fnatic lose that game. He's 100 CS down and get it, doesn't matter. Set goes in, press your R on top of him, they win the team fight. He doesn't press the buttons, and Tess just gets away with these sort of things, right? Their approach to its neutral objective setups, I think there's a lot of flaws towards it as well. And it's the same reason why when I went back to say that, okay, down 1 beat G2 in this way, so I have like kind of doubts, like, have they really learned their lesson? I think there's some learning over there, but it's the same problem with Tess, right? When they won the LPL, when they made the finals, they won it off such dominating laning phases, right? They went in there, they smashed the bot lane. That's how they beat Suning the first time around. They smashed the top lane, they smashed the bot lane. I also think that Suning kind of drafted badly in the semifinal series as well. But then when they face off once again, and then Suning, they got their priorities right, they counterpicked the right positions. Then all of a sudden, okay, our top lane's not smashing Bin, our bot lane's not smashing, and what do we do now? Then it comes to like managing the macro game, and then we see some of these flaws coming through from Tess.
So basically, they just needed me at Worlds because I'm really good at pushing Nemesis's buttons. Whatever, keep going. That's a freebie for you, mate, there.
See, the thing that makes me frustrated is that we see, this has been a perpetual problem throughout the entire history of League of Legends, is you have a star mid laner, and then what you do is you pick them Orianna blind, or you pick them into a safe Orianna matchup, and then they just sit there on Orianna.
Boring as fucking it, yeah.
Like, Faker's done this. Like, every star mid laner in the universe, Rookie's done this. Everyone has done it at a certain point in time. And you can be a fucking amazing Orianna player, but the difference between like a good Orianna player or that control mage player who plays Orianna just because that's what his fucking job is in the team, just to be safe and not die in lane, and then like a top level Orianna player, there's not like a lot of difference there. Like, there's some difference, sure. I mean, you've seen amazing Faker Orianna plays. You've seen amazing rookie Orianna plays, right? But the universe of difference is not a lot. So what really pisses me off about what Top did in the semifinals is I had to watch 3 games of Knight on Orianna.
A guy with a champion ocean, by the way.
So not only that, Thorin, it gets even dumber. Were you ready for it? I had to watch 3 games of him on Orianna, while simultaneously they were giving top lane counter picks. How the fuck does that happen? How do you either take a safe Orianna matchup, and you are picking the Orianna? I think that happened in 2 of the games. Let me look real quick. So Top was blind picked the Orianna in games 1 and 4 without knowing the mid lane matchup, and then they picked Orianna into Zoe, which is reasonable, I guess. Into the second game, right? And the one time, so, okay, you get all that done, right? So if that is what your strategy is, how are you also giving away a solo lane? Like, why are you blind picking your solo laner, right? Or why are you allowing them to have the solo lane counter pick? Like, that shouldn't be a thing that happens a lot of the time if you're playing this right, or if you know that their strategy coming in is that they want to save the last pick on red side for their top laner, you should be getting mid lane counter picks, right? And the one game that we saw that was really extraordinary was when he had the Echo counter pick in the mid lane, right? This was where he was really popping off. And honestly, with his performance, like if his side lanes didn't randomly die in like the first 5 minutes of that game, there was a good chance that he could have split pushed and won because his performance on that champion was amazing. And what's so frustrating about watching this team is that if I send my mind back in time to the group stages and I think about Knight's counter picks and I think about how he played the Nocturne into the Twisted Fate from DRX and how fucking awesome that was. He played 5 games of Orianna in this Worlds, and he played 2 games of Sylas and 1 game of everything else. But it just felt like he wasn't being given the tools to succeed or tools to carry. And so people will shit on Knight, and they'll be like, well, Knight should win the Dade award here. First off, he wasn't bad enough to win the Dade award.
Exactly.
He wasn't terrible.
Yes.
But he wasn't as much as he was hyped up to be. But the drafts guys didn't allow him to do that. Think about when he got counter picks, when he had the Nocturne, when he had the Echo. He had good games. These were really exciting games to watch.
Also, I'll do the same thing I did for the Perks Caps example. Guess what, 369? Your turn to carry, my G. You have been given the fucking picks you need. Roll some 9s for me. Instead, I'm getting 6s and 3s all day long. Like, that's what killed me about this, Jensen, because I have to speculate. My guess would be, like everyone else who watched Sunning in this tournament, they were fucking terrified of Bin, and so 369 wanted to prove a point. He wanted to have his fucking picks, and I didn't see much from him this series, mate.
I do think he did get quite a bit done in the second game, right? What did he get the counter pick for in the second game? Let me just quickly check.
Was that the one where he had Jax? Or was that game 3? Let me think. No, this was the Ornn versus GP.
Yeah. So he got a GP into the Ornn, and the GP did quite a lot in the game eventually. Once he was able to get to the 2-item spike, right, which is what the composition is supposed to do. But in terms of like, I have to agree with the sentiment over here, and I wouldn't pin it on the players because I really do think that this shows. I'm gonna make the rookie excuse that people always give the players, but I'm gonna say it for the coaching staff because this is for me the way I look at it. The coaches for this team, they have not been to international events. I think like maybe I see Gung on this roster. The last time they have been to international events like 2013 or something.
Yes.
And the understanding of how do you prepare, how do you manage, especially for this year's Worlds, right? Where you're in China, you're in the bubble since start of September. You're basically here for 2 months. And how do you manage the logistics? How do you manage the operations of how do you plan for a series? And you contrast that with Sunning's coach, which is somebody who has coached Flash Wolves and meme the LMS region all you want, but he has been to international.
He's played Korean teams a million times. Yeah, of course. He's got loads of experience.
So, he knows the importance of controlling information. He knows the importance of preparing for a draft. And whereas for TS, it's like, okay, this is how we like to play League of Legends. We're going to play this like we're playing a best of 3, like we're playing a best of 1. And then it's like, oh shit, okay, we're 2-1 down now. What do we do? Or he might have bought into the ideas like, that's a correct way. That's this global meta thinking. And then it's like, okay, I'm going to play to my player's strengths. Let's draft for comfort. And they kind of ignore what their opponents are doing, which is what causes this to come into play where they're reacting to what the opponents are doing, and then they panic in game 4, and then you just have this draft that just.
I mean, I just don't understand in what universe you're using your picks to like why are you like taking the lease in these scenarios? Like, you have these opportunities to provide at least one solo lane counter pick. Like, just give me one, right? And see what they can do, because you should be activating Knight here, not trying to like go deep into the draft and kind of like counter pick a support or a jungle. It's weird.
Also, by the way, because everyone does that every year, Monty. It's like we cursed ourselves by making that Dade award, because then everyone has to like misapply it every single fucking year.
Indeed.
Suck out of my face that Knight gets the Dade award. The Dade award's when you shit the bed completely. Like, listen, he wasn't the MVP of the tournament, but like I said, there was way more nuance to some of his games. And like we say, sometimes he just wasn't even given the tools to do anything.
People forget how appalling Dade was in 2013.
Yes,
like,
exactly.
He was awful.
And by the way, if y'all want to play that game, Western fans, all right, I've got a new game. How about we make a Western Dade award? And you can go ahead and stack a whole bunch of those for your boy Bjergsen right next to all those MVPs from LCS, you daft little cunts. He comes in super hyped every fucking time. Every year he's on a top 20 worlds list. Motherfucker, he's never the top 20 player at Worlds ever. What are you talking about? Not at any point in his career. That was always just marketing. And I get why they did it. Here's what people don't know. I'm going to reveal it right now. Ooh, I'm going to fucking pull back the curtain and show you the little man pulling all the levers that is your fucking Reddit accounts, right? If people don't know, They would even tell you, those old school LOL esports writers who originally were the ones who made the top 20 lists, the reason they even initially just called it top 20, but not top 20 best players, is because they were always flirting with the idea that it was either the top 20 best players, if you don't know, or they could always fall back to it. I just meant top 20 players to watch. Like, I just was trying to highlight big names. They were always playing with you fucking idiots. It's like when sports people put power rankings out. It's there for you to argue about. You're not supposed to go, I agree perfectly with this. They purposely go, is there an edge I could make people angry with this? That's how you get clicks. If we learned one thing about the internet, please, anyone who knows what politics is like right now, you don't get clicks by doing awesome shit that people like. You get hate clicks. Hate clicks are the number one. I know, mate, because I fucking made a career off that. I didn't do it on purpose. I'm luckily born like a man out of time, where everything I just say is considered wrong. Like I'm just the golden child. Like some people are just doing that cynically. Like, you got to stop believing this shit. Like, obviously he was never a top 20 player, was he? Get the fuck out.
Also, it has to be said that the people who made those original lists were fired from Riot.
Oh, of course.
Because they were terrible. I mean, they're not terrible people, but they were terrible at knowing the game of League of Legends.
Yeah, I also totally understand as well. Don't worry, we were playing the game as well. Like, they were basically the bad guys, because they would come out every year and be like, I think I'm just going to leave off Prey and Smeb and stuff from this list, lol. This is going out like this, lol. And then obviously they're the bad guys. Like, they're like fucking, I don't know, some guys out of wrestling, I can't remember. And then we just come in like the heels. Like, we're like, at that point, the fans are waiting for the next episode of someone inside, because then me and Monty are like fucking Ric Flair and Hulk Hogan, like, let's get him, brother. We come running in and we just fucking lay the smackdown. Everyone's like, yes, it's righteous. They told them how it is. They fucked with the Riot Corporation. But yeah, listen, it was all a game.
It did work really well.
It was awesome.
I've
said this was awesome. Yeah,
I said this before, but if Riot hadn't been so dumb historically, then my content would have gotten a lot fewer views. The fact that it was so easy to point out what was wrong and laugh at it, it did help. It did help that they were bad.
You might appreciate this, because I actually genuinely, I'll just say it right now, I actually literally, this year, I actually did send a DM to Miri, the guy who was like the editor-in-chief, and I just said, actually, basically, like, we miss you in League of Legends. I didn't say all those reasons why. Obviously, listen, that's for me to know and him to wonder, but...
He's a friend of mine, and I think he has much better skills when it comes to other aspects of working kind of in the gaming industry, for sure. I just think that he was weirdly put in that position that wasn't really his forte. Let's put it that way. But yeah, I do find it hilarious. Thorin, I don't even know what we're going to complain about if they change the world's format. What happens if Riot gets smarter and then we can't make content anymore?
Well, the joke there is we'll just enjoy a really good tournament and actually be able to treat it like it's a real esport, where, for example, if you're the 5th best team in China, you don't sit at Worlds and everyone goes, wow, you're really failing in your career. And then I have to watch fucking FlyQuest I'm at the World Championship. I am a top 16 team. Shut the fuck up. So what I would say is this is that whole angle, put it this way, the reason why I actually wistfully looked back at the days where he used to get me mad with his articles is because they don't even have that on LOL Esports. LOL Esports now is what actually British reality game shows became. Those talent contests, obviously Britain has Got Talent and X Factor, these really popular ones. I don't know if you know this because you have to watch British TV, but they really became the most cynical vehicles ever, because by the end, they weren't about finding the best singer. I'm not joking, Monty. Every episode, it's because obviously there's a million people who can sing a song vaguely like Mariah Carey. It's right, you're a 9 out of 10, he's a 9.5 out of 10, 9. Really, it's you're not really picking among much. So what became the tiebreaker for whether you got the TV time was how maudlin your fucking life was. So if your dad just died of cancer, or someone's got AIDS, or you were homeless, you are instantly going to be all the TV time, because it's all about the human element of I'm really pulling for him. Dude, that's what LOL Esports is now. I wish someone would go and put an ignorant analysis of the game. I don't get it, because it's all about, and right before the tournament, his little dog died, and as the light was going out of its eyes, he thought, fuck, I'm going to win a Worlds for old Skipper. Give me a break. What is this? It's not a movie. This is real life. Tell me something about the game. Why should I care about this guy? Listen, unless at the end of that article, you're and if you donate £5 today, that could get him another dog. Unless it's going to end on a charity note, I don't really want that angle. It's cynical. It's just gross.
And I hate to tell you guys, but oftentimes in sports or esports, the most unlikable people are perfectly capable of winning championships, because turns out being likable doesn't make you good at sports or video games.
Dude, there was a player.
Quality.
Listen, they might know who they are if they're watching this episode. And I have some old school fans who do watch. So I'm not going to call you out, but I'm going to reference you. There was a player who's one of the greatest players ever in like Europe. He was like an amazing player. And I'm not joking. Like he actually just didn't shower. And every time I met him, like, this is how you know he must have just been trapped in a bubble where no one ever told him this, is because like, even I was like, can you really just tell someone to their face they stink? Even I was like, guess I better apply that tact thing people are all telling me to do. So even I was just like, well, I'll just let this go. And I was just thinking like, dude, how you must be amazing at the game to make it if you just stink and you live in a team house. Give me a fucking break. Like, I'd kick you out tomorrow. In fact, there was another guy, I won't link this too far because people will guess otherwise. But you know this, Monty. One time I had to give you some reconnaissance information about some players in case maybe some of these players might come to your team. And one of the things I did report, because I thought it was valid, was his breath stinks. Like, this guy, I just said it. Like, and I'm not saying that's why he did or didn't get on the team, but I'd like to believe that at least played a part, you know. See, that's what changes the course of history, boys. Whether you fucking use the Colgate after you have that tuna or not. Not how good you are in lane.
These are true stories. I can confirm. I know what he's talking about. But yeah, it is just super funny to kind of see the narrative angle be pushed. But I mean, at a certain point too, that's kind of all you have. Like, it's not like a lot of, you know, the LCS or LoL esports have much to work with. I mean, thankfully, this is why G2 is so fucking awesome, guys, because G2 it's like almost unfair how perfect they are. They have a unique style. They're incredibly exciting to watch play. They're all super fucking funny and like likable as players, and all have really distinct personalities, and they don't mind just putting themselves out there. They have everything that you could possibly want from a professional team, which is really, really rare. And we don't see that often. We don't see like the combination of like really interesting, like fun personalities combined with skill, combined with like this really riveting play style. We saw it with Samsung White. I think we're seeing it with Damwon now. Like, by the way, I fucking love Damwon. Just like,
oh yeah, that BM.
Oh my god, the BM was
perfect,
beautiful in that match.
Because by the way, that whole topic was so whack, was it? Where people were like wigging out completely. Like I said to Carlos, and he knows it's true. Do you imagine that if G2 would won, they were just going to get up and respectfully bow and then go off to, they would have done like a fucking human pyramid where like at the end, like one of them shoots like chocolate sauce in the other one's mouth or something. Like they were styling. You think they don't love that shit? So the idea that Damwon can't do, what G2 themselves just did to their fallen points. Like, what sort of insane double standards is this? This is mental, guys.
Dude, I love the European fans because they get so salty. It's like, so NA fans tend to be just super salty in general, and they just get randomly angry during the regular season. Normally, European fans are totally fine. It's all fair banter. But as soon as a team like starts to make semifinals, that's when they just go out of their minds. So like, how can you, European fans, how can you be mad at literally the same thing G2 did? That's it. They did the same thing. How can you be mad? If you weren't mad at G2 before, why does it make sense to be mad now?
Here's how you know Damwon is a truly special outlier Korean team. For one day only, they turned G2 fans into Fnatic fans. And by the way, if there's one thing you should never become, children, it's a Fnatic fan. Listen, you can enjoy Reckless's play. You can have his poster on the wall and go, oh gosh, it's good looks. And you know, he has that cool tattoo on his arm. That's so sick. And I get that, right? Fine. But don't become a K-pop stan for a fucking League of Legends player. Like, I've always said this. Me and Richard are in agreement on this. The ultimate sin of Overwatch was to infect esports with K-pop fans.
Oh,
like,
I agree.
It's like the zombie apocalypse. Awful. How dare you? How dare you, Overwatch?
I totally agree. As somebody who had to live through that and just like watch the kind of demographic like transform, it was like a plague that was it was the pandemic that was spawned within Overwatch, which is like, Overwatch League started out as like normal esports fans, and then just got weirder and weirder and weirder and weirder as time went on.
Dude,
like,
the worst thing
you guys
is,
don't even care about sports. You just like are here to like stand the players. Like, what is going on?
I actually didn't even put two and two together because I knew what K-pop stands were like. Obviously, I knew that was like a thing, but I actually thought people were trolling at first because you know when they would do all those weird memes like, we must protect him. I will cherish it and all that. I thought, oh, they're just trolling. What they mean is that they're big fans. It's like I would joke about like Frogger or something, you know, like I'll defend him against anything. But obviously, it's like not real. Like I didn't realize. Wait a minute, that's real. Like they actually are being serious. They're gonna kill a motherfucker because he said like, you know, he had a fucking reckless as bad as something. Like this is unreasonable. And also, I'll make a similar joke to one that I made when we were doing by the numbers in CSGO, which is because in CSGO, we'd started to air into these areas where Jensen, like we were having to like out people who were like potential like career criminals in Eastern Europe and obviously certain other parts of the Asian region. Maybe they had match fixing in CSGO. You know, we were getting into territory now, by the way, where you're no longer just calling players out. You're calling out people who have connections who in real life might just make you exit the Summoner's Rift of real life, if that analogy makes sense. And I made this point. I said, listen, Richard, I might have to just tap out now, mate, because you know what? I don't want to die for esports. Like, that ain't the way I'm going out. Like, that's because there's nothing glorious about it, is there? Like, if I die, like I said, I want to die for like Quake or some old school game I love that was like, you know, did mean a lot to me. I don't want to die for League of Legends. I want to die because someone likes Reckless too much. Like, that's the shittest way to die ever. At least let me go out on my shield. Like, go out for something good.
Especially when you don't even get to die for it. You just randomly die in an accident. And
yeah, exactly.
You don't even get credit.
Exactly. And by the way, guys, just so you know, I'll never, ever die while, you know, as a joke, I'll say thinking about frogging, if you know the analogy I mean. Like, listen, I would be very careful if I ever engaged in that behavior. That's all I'm going to say. Guns in the sky. That's all I'm saying. Listen, I kept that solid enough, Monty. Keep going.
All right. Do we want to talk about like the
Jensen did a really
preview?
good job not talking at any point during that because listen, that was a minefield, and I kept saying like, "Want to come in? Water's nice."
Jensen just sit there.
Yeah, let's do the final. Because here's the problem. I can already tell you. Here's how I'll set up the final. By all reasonable metrics of how the year's gone, how the tournament's gone, how the teams match up, the experience of the players, nearly everyone should be predicting Damwon to win. But the reason why I think this is a really interesting final is that factor I said before. Dude, Sunning has come on leaps and bounds as each round of the tournament goes on. And crucially for me, I was very worried for their team because they had so many rookies to international play. They don't look like any of them have been phased thus far. Like, I haven't seen them look like, oh, they just break. Like, I thought Top could beat them just because of the whole thing of, like, you're the little brother and they're the big brother. Like, they're the champions of your region. Normally, that's mean you're going to value them higher. But, like, the fact that that hasn't happened, fuck, maybe it's game on.
Yeah, I actually think that there's quite a few arguments you can make for that Suning actually wins the finals, right? Like I said, it's a very red side dependent series. If Suning starts red, I can see roles in which they win the finals. But it's the unfortunate thing about sometimes the format, the lack of symmetry between the sides in League of Legends, especially in draft, and how it can end up in scenarios where it's just like, okay, we see Suning start on red side, and then we see just teams just exchange red and blue, and red side just wins every single game. Although that may or may not happen, I would really think red side has a very big advantage. And if Suning starts red, that could really be how they win the finals in itself. And it's like you mentioned, right? Like in terms of how they evolve, and I do believe it's a different coaching staff that was with Damwon. I'm not sure how experienced they are, but I think Damwon is doing fine in terms of adapting and growing with the meta. But definitely not.
Zepha's their head coach, and he's been around forever. So
yeah, so okay, then that probably isn't. They wouldn't run the same issue as Top Esports in terms of like doing prep. But there's this challenge, right? Like once you go into the finals, especially for the World Championship, finding scrims becomes an issue. So I think that this played a very big factor for G2 in 2019 when you went in there. You played against two very similar style teams. You play against Damwon, you play against SKT. They needed to play against FPX. And you were all of a sudden you're in Paris, and then you may or may not. I'm not sure if they had the proper internet to scrim or whatsoever, but you can't find scrims. You can't find good scrims for you to get practice against your finals opponent. This time they're in Asia, so I think it might be better for Damwon. But
certainly
I think
more
definitely
opponents to pick from across regions. So
yeah,
but I do agree, and we bring this up every Worlds that we talk about. But the weird thing about Worlds finals is as follows. The previous week, when you're practicing for semifinals, you're practicing against one of your finals opponents. So you have to be very careful in your scrims that you're not giving away too much information to either of those teams. And then once you finish your semifinal match, you're basically frozen because there aren't Worlds caliber opponents any longer because all of them have gone home. And even if they were to keep practicing, do you really want to keep practicing against Top, who doesn't give a shit anymore, who's just like sitting around? You know, Top doesn't want to play League of Legends right now. They just got beaten. So even if they were in an unlikely scenario to agree to like be your scrim partner, which is also like, why would they? Because you would be beating one of their Chinese compatriots, right? So there are all these very weird scenarios that crop up, but basically that you can expect like the meta not to move. And then you kind of have to wonder what was going on in the mind games and the scrims that were happening like a week ago. So it gets very, very strange.
Well, Monty, I think last year's World Final has to be the best example. The guys from G2 have even said they couldn't handle FPX whenever they played them in scrims, so they came in with a psychological disadvantage. And what did they do in draft? Some of the most bizarre drafts I've ever seen. Like that fucking Pike mid one was like that to me says I've just lost 18 scrims where I did normal drafts, so I'm just going to do fucking like roll the dice. Like the problem is though, as a fan and an analyst, you weren't watching those scrims, so we don't know what the fuck the result is. Like for all we know, it's actually what people were saying. If you notice, people like Jensen picked Sunning to win before the bracket. They said in scrims Sunning was the best, so who knows? Maybe Sunning's the only team that can match Damwon. I don't personally think so, but it's an angle. The point is we can't know what we don't know in that regard. There are some massive like black holes in terms of trying to predict what goes on. That you have to just speculate into basically. I will say this though, this is where I actually feel like I've seen too many tournaments. You know what? I'm going to do that thing where I put myself out there. And if I'm wrong, everyone will just mention it forever. In which case, amazing marketing by me. Why am I even a storyline about a tournament? I'm not even playing it. I'm just a fucking British guy who just goes, remember Quake? That sort of relates to League of Legends. They go, shut the fuck up. And so, yeah, not a bad career. Here's what I will say. After seeing many, many tournaments, even though I set it up there to be like, wow, yeah, and they haven't been phased at all. There's a final boss level of every game, which is when you make the final. And anyone who's never been in this scenario won't get it. Even a semi-final, which at that point is the biggest game of your career, it ain't the same as the final. Because in the semi-final, you don't win the championship if you win the game. And if you're the underdog, it's like, fuck it, just give it a go. When you're in the final, you know that if you win this game, you win the world championship. That alone is like another level of pressure that these players have never experienced in their whole career. None of them. They've never been in that situation ever. In fact, I would say this, the most likely outcome, in my opinion, maybe the most likely, but a likely outcome, I'd give it like a 30% chance, is that the storyline is like, Damwon's the clear favourite, but wow, arguably best performing team of the tournament could also be Sunning, and then Sunning just falls flat and it's just 3-0 Damwon, and it's just boring. And one of the reasons why I'm saying that is because one of the coolest storylines of this tournament was SOFM, of course. Like that clip I retweeted the other day where he just spends like 2 minutes fucking with all the backs of the guys from TES. Great. It's like, dude, that's like some troll shit from Solo Queue and just do it in the game. Also, by the way, he's such a G. He's making Jarvan look like a viable pick in 2020. Like that's the shit that NA players pick when they want to go home. That's just like, get me out of his shit. So like that was a really cool storyline. One problem for you guys, he's about to go against arguably the best jungler in the whole world. So I don't feel like that story has a happy ending, unfortunately.
Well, and also Canyon is much more meta appropriate than I would say Karsa is as well. Like I think
the meta's in his pocket, man.
Way better at the meta picks. And the other thing you have to remember too is that even though both of these teams were playing on LAN more than teams in other regions, like in NA and EU, like you had, the LCK sometimes playing and then going back into online, and you did have more games in the LPL that were played on LAN. Remember that there are going to be spectators in a stadium for this final. China has said that is going to happen. And so in terms of stadium games, this is going to be the first one really of the year. For the most part. Correct me if I'm wrong, Jens. I don't think the LPL finals, if I recall, were played in stadiums with active audiences. I think this is the first time since the pandemic started. So
I'm not sure about that either.
But at least at this scale. But I'm just saying the pressure is going to be on in a very different way than it was for any of these teams at any point in time in 2020. So what you're saying, Thorin, when you take the kind of baseline mental pressure of being in a grand final, and then you combine that with a completely different experience to everything you've experienced this year, even though these teams were winning their splits, right? They just simply weren't in these environments. And so I think that even makes the pressure more intense. And
I'll even throw in one last angle, which goes like this. It's only a very quick one, which is Western players don't get this. I actually made this point years ago when the West used to always lose. I used to say the craziest thing is there's actually a psychological edge that Western teams could have, but they can't get over the hurdle of being good enough at the game, which was this. If you are a player like Swaz, Wonder, Caps, you can play, maybe even int the game and just go, who gives a fuck, and just go chill. Like, nobody from Denmark goes, Wonder, you've let down the pride of Denmark. He'd be like, I don't give a fuck, and load up World of Warcraft. That is a big deal for Chinese people and for Korean people, and they know it. These players, I'm not joking, one of the reasons they cry when they lose is because they actually feel like the national pride has been let down. Remember, these are Confucian cultures. Like, this is, people in the West don't get it. Like, if I do something, like, it's like, I've always said this, right? Americans don't know how to insult British people because they always go, fuck the Queen. And it's like, mate, what century do you think I live in? Like, I don't give a fuck about the monarchy. What are you talking about? Like, that doesn't insult me. I don't look at a pound coin and go, love, we'll get it back. Like, I don't give a fuck. Yeah, I'll say as well, fuck the Queen. There we go. I'm not going to get killed. Like, it's a big deal if you lose and you represent, like, this is going to be China versus Korea, by the way, in this final. Like, this isn't just like a Chinese team versus, like, there's going to be a big deal in that regard. So, like, Jensen, what would you say to that? Do you think that's a factor?
I think it's definitely going to be a factor as well. I think SOFM talked about it in one of his interviews. That he feels the pressure because the Vietnamese teams couldn't make it, and the Vietnamese following for League of Legends is so insane, and he's definitely feeling it. I mean, I'm friends with a lot of the Vietnamese players on Facebook, and I see every day they're tagging him and saying that, oh, congrats, you made the Worlds, and they're like posting memes, and everybody's tagging him there. I mean, I think he's smart enough not to turn on the VPN to look at Facebook, but I can imagine what it's like, right? So it's not just for China as well. He feels like he's representing Vietnam, and they definitely feel it. They definitely feel like the national pride is on stake. But whether it faces them or not, I think once again it comes down to who they are as people, right? Some people thrive when in other people it can cause them to crumble.
Yes.
So we haven't seen which one it is. And the thing about Suning is that so far they've only played within China, right? They've only played.
Yeah, it was never that dynamic. Exactly. Yeah.
Well, I think
obviously remember they didn't have a Korean team in their group, so they've actually never had that like intra-regional battle of Asia.
I also just think it's very intriguing because not only the pressure of the crowd and everything like that, but when it comes to I forgot where I was going with this shit.
Circle back again to your thought before, and you'll get there. Where were you before?
No, just about the kind of cultural pressures that are happening here.
Well, dude, remember when you did the World Cyber Games, where, by the way, you met your wife? Not really like that, but I did it just to be silly. Like, as though he was like, wow, it really is beyond the game. Like, no. When Monty did the World Cyber Games, where this beloved top laner, Flame, won an international gold medal or whatever, when they were on that Blaze team
scared.
Against that Nama team, if people don't know, because the Koreans just smashed the super team of, like, China, all the fans just like fucking left and just threw all the shit on the floor. Like they were like mad PM, weren't they? They didn't even like wait till it was over or some shit, right?
So basically they were trying to make like a Chinese super team to beat CJ Blaze at the time. And what ended up happening, this was in 2013, at the end of 2013. So they like combined two rosters and like moved Name over so that they would have the chance to win. And I was casting at this event in China, and literally like Blaze just destroys them. And the crowd is silent at the end. And the only sound is like the pop of like people stomping on thunder sticks. And there's like 8,000 people there. And I'm just like, are they going to riot? Like, what is going on? It was eerie and very unpleasant.
Exactly. So imagine being the Chinese player who just looks out of the crowd that you've just let down completely. Like, then like next year, guys, like give me a break. Like, I actually feel sorry for those players in that regard. Yeah. That's what people never understood. Like, listen, it isn't literally life and death in that sense, but like the feeling is like it's life and death. Like everything rides on that moment. Anyway, Jensen, you alluded to it earlier. Are you one of the people who's actually picking Suning to win the final?
I don't really know yet. I haven't done my.
You're torn, aren't you?
Yet, right? Yeah.
What is it aside from the color of the sides? What are the other factors? Like, what would have to happen for Suning to win?
I still do think that other than the color of the sides, I do think that the LPL teams can punish the LCK teams the same way that I felt that G2 would be able to punish Damwon. But I'm not sure, right? Because I felt that Damwon was making very specific adaptations to his G2, like the one where Caps was hiding in the Crux bush, and they knew that he might be somewhere around there. So they were making adaptations to the way the G2 has beaten them in the past, but it was not necessarily the correct adaptations because we still see them open in 3 lanes, right? So I still do think that that's an area in which Suning can win against them, especially because Suning is a team that they are actually good at to borrow Yamato Cannon's phrasing is they're very good at finding activity outside of around the dragon phases, and teams that are able to find this activity will be able to make the 2-lane punish on the 3-lane setups. So I do see that is one of the ways that Suning wins as well. But breaking surf on blue side, I think they have tools to do it. And it really comes down to draft. This is kind of a cop-out answer, right? But
okay, then give us some angles. What would have to happen in the draft for them to win?
Here's the thing, dude. Like, I just don't think that. I think that Top's mistake was drafting like a bitch against Suning and just not taking any side lane advantages or trying to push it. And the thing about Damwon is they won't do that. You know what I mean? Like, they're not going to give up both side lane counter picks or just randomly play Orianna for no reason, right? I think that they tend to be much more active in draft, and I think that they have the attitude and the players who really just want to style on people. And, I mean, Ghost and Beryl have been playing well, but all they have to do is just play some engage lanes, basically, right? You know Beryl's going to play Leona or Pantheon or Thresh or some kind of engaged champion, and you know that Ghost is just going to play a utility AD carry that has crowd controller engage potential, Ashe and Jhin probably, mostly, maybe the Callista, depending, right? And then they're going to let Canyon, like if they don't ban Graves, then Canyon's just going to pick Graves, and we know that the side lanes are going to just try and style and try and get some counter picks in. And I would have to see a very specific game plan from Suning that would make me believe that they're able to go toe-to-toe like that.
I would actually have to say that. I mean, your mic cut out a little bit because of the internet. So your point was about that Damwon can facilitate the top side and play mid and the top really well, right?
Yeah, and because they don't need priority picks for their bot lane, because their bot lane, unlike tops, just knows that their job is to be utility, right? And I think it revolves around Canyon, because unless you try and ban out Canyon, which then you're leaving up some crazy picks like Syndra or Camille, which Nagari and Showmaker will definitely be totally about playing, right? I think it's really, really hard to deal with this team.
That's why I think it's impossible to draft against Damwon right now, because it's pick your poison between Showmaker and Naguri. I even think they're one of the rare teams I've seen where there isn't even that's 1A, 1B. That isn't even he's the best. Either of them can carry the game. So what you have to choose is which one of these do I want to potentially get an edge on my player? What fucking coach wants to be in that scenario?
I think for Suning the answer will be to focus top lane. They would definitely be drafting for Bin to be enabled, and that has been their MO throughout the entire playoffs itself. I mean, I don't want to keep going back to the red side, blue side thing, but this is how I'll frame my argument for Suning, as in it's a context of who can break serve better on blue side, right? So I'm just going to assume that whoever's on red side is going to be the favorite to win that game in general, simply because they can last pick for the top laner, and both top laners have decent champion pools, and the way that you can set up draft right now, the blind picks are all exploitable in all very unique ways in their own. So the question is, who can set up on blue side better for a composition that has the best chance of breaking serve against red side? And why might Suning be able to win that? I think it will come down to them either facilitating around SOFM's jungling style, and I think that there even might be something there. The fact that SOFM is going to pick Jarvan, he's going to pick Lee Sin, then they contest mid to reduce, then they contest topside to reduce. We can see windows in which they can attack against Damwon.
I mean, so I agree with you. I just don't think I don't think that the best way to play this meta is the way that SOFM plays. I agree that he can. We saw the Shen come out, and I loved the Shen composition that they ran with Jackson the top side. But that's again predicated on the top lane counterpick, which I agree with your analysis. I think it's very insightful to talk about the importance of the red side. But when you're dealing with this, everything SOFM does is predicated on propping up the advantages of the side lanes, or not the side lanes, of his lanes, right? Canyon is carrying the fucking game himself in a lot of these situations. And given the power of the jungle currently, I just think that that's a more efficient way to play League of Legends. So it's not that Suning can't win. Suning can certainly do what they did to top and really perform well in the early game, and SOFM can have a massive effect to get Bin ahead on this Jax or another hyper carry counterpick. That can happen. I just think it's not the best way to win a game of League of Legends at this World Championship, which is why I struggle to see them actually taking this.
Yep.
I wouldn't say
By the way,
it's like 90% that Damwon wins, but I'd say it's probably like 75.
I do think, though, like, if we're going to talk about some other things now, like, obviously we've gone quite deep on that. I don't know if anyone saw this, but if you were following on Twitter where people like Ashley Kang were translating from Korean, obviously on the LCK broadcast, they've had all these guest commentators. They had Rookie, they had The Shy, they've had a whole bunch of these people come and do commentary, right? And I've mentioned this on a past episode, but like I am actually in love with The Shy's commentary because he is the most delusional motherfucker
It's so funny.
ever to do. Like my dream after watching that Doublelift Worlds video today is like, please God, someone just get these two men in a room and let these two fucking knuckleheads just break down everything in League of Legends. Like these are two people where it's like, you're not even sure that the words that come from their brains are the ones coming out their mouths. They're just saying stuff that's just nonsense. Like, I don't know if you know this. I don't know if you saw this at all, Jensen, but like The Shy's perception of himself is it's nuts. It's like someone slipped LSD in his drink before he starts talking. He sees himself as a player who's amazing at playing weak side tanks and out of choice would just play on all the time. Like, dude, I don't even know what even like. It's like he's talking. It's like he keeps accent. You know where sometimes you fuck up on shows and you say the wrong name or something. Like I said, like if I was talking about Bjergsen, but I said Jensen instead because I was talking about the other mid laner, you know, and then it might confuse a fan. But if they looked at the context, they'd be like, well, obviously he was talking about Bjergsen. They're like, it's like The Shy's doing that about himself, but he thinks he's Gimgoon or something. It's like, what are you talking about? Like, dude, he had the craziest opinions ever, and they're just consistent. Like, he's just like, listen, as someone who's a specialist in this, he's just a bad take factory. He just churns these, it's like an assembly line every time, just 10 out of 10 quality. Like, I've come to your factory and inspected it. It's fantastic quality. How are you doing this, sir? Like, have you seen any of this stuff, Jensen? It's nuts, mate. Some of these interviews are amazing.
I haven't had a chance to see that yet.
Well, maybe I'll give you a little taste. The classic one that set me on this path where I had to just start consuming all of his interviews because it was like a drug to me how bad they were. Basically, he's replaced Miri from LoL Esports for like bad takes. The one that really opened my eyes was at the end of last year. So just think after Worlds last year, Jensen, where the world was and these players I'm about to mention. Right, obviously, one of the big moves was FPX signed Khan, who'd been on SKT, right? In an interview after Worlds, The Shy described Khan as his ideal top laner. I'm out. Oh, that's enough for me. That's, you know, that one where like Jerry Seinfeld's like, well, that's enough for me. Like everyone's like, that's enough internet for today. It's like, that's what I felt like at that moment. Like, you know what? I'm too deep on this shit. I need to go to like a fucking forest, like a nice clearing. I need to meditate, get in tune with the earth again, because I need to get this toxic shit out of my mind. Like, I can't handle that opinion. That opinion has the ability, like, could like collapse my own brain in on itself. Like, that's when I just wake up out of the coma, like, Thorin, it's 2014. It's 2014. Alliance hasn't played Kaboom yet. Oh, okay. All right. Oh, cool. Fuck, that was a really weird fever dream. But like, you know, it was wild. Yeah.
I think my favorite one was when he was criticizing some of the players in the semis for like random flanks or plays as if...
No, it's so sick. Self-awareness.
As if he isn't like the king of inting sometimes.
I know.
He's like, I can't figure out like why they would flank like this. I'm like, what do you think when you do it?
Oh, no, the best part is there was also a conversation he was having with like Rookie where basically he was trying to like do that thing where, you know, when you talk to someone else and it's like, you know, it's us, me and you, and they're the idiots. He was flaming like Jackie Love being like, how is it like me and you are always playing the right way? And you could tell Rookie was just looking at him the way like Bjergsen looked at Doublelift in that playoff series, like, really? Like, what we is this? It's me, and then you're one of the inters as well, you fucking bastard. Like, I'd be at Worlds right now if I was... And then he's like, no, keep it together. We've already scared away Jackie Love. We're going to keep Shy on the tip. Like, I can't... Rookie must have the... He must be like the... I bet he's like the next Bodhisattva for something. The patience this man must have is unbelievable, isn't it? The shit he's been through.
Yeah, it's pretty top tier. I do want to hit one more topic before we end the show. So, I mean, apparently Jensen hasn't had enough time to consider his actual prediction. I think down 1-3-1 here.
I'll just be brutal. I'll say down 1-3-0. Like I said, I could see a world where they just choke a little bit. The Chinese players, it's stressful. Never been. And also, this is a really dangerous thing if you're an underdog. They've already accomplished more than they needed to. They've already had an amazing Worlds. You don't ever want to say that before the final. Like, the difference is if Dan 1 loses, they didn't have an amazing Worlds. Like, they were expected to win. So that is a very different dynamic in my opinion. So I think Dan 1's going to smash this one. Got a prediction, Jensen?
He hasn't thought about it enough yet.
Yeah, I mean, but I'm just gonna go my gut, but this is the fan prediction, right? I love the GPL. SOFM is sort of come from the GPL. I predict Suning 2-2.
Are you going to publish a video on this one, by the way?
Yes, I will. Yes, I will.
Nice.
Okay. So I'm going to do the deep dive. I'm going to look at.
We'll wait for your final prediction when your video comes out.
Come up with something.
Yeah, there we go. What was the last topic then, Monty?
The Alfari to Team Liquid rumors, which just destroys my soul.
Why? Oh, you want him to stay in LEC, you mean?
I want him to stay in a good team.
Okay.
Like, selfishly, I'd love to see what he could do on Rogue or something like that and staying in the European region.
Mad Lions,
I don't,
teams,
I don't want him to come to NA. I mean, good for him for making bank, because I'm sure he would by making that transition.
Oh, apparently he's going to make millions, yeah.
So good for him, but at the same time, as far as competitiveness goes, this is a guy who is really starting to hit his prime right now. And remember that he came from the Renegades B team in Europe back before he was even 17 years old. We had scouted him and were really impressed with his play in Europe. And we thought, hey, this guy is going to be super good at some point in time. Ended up that he was, on the up and up. I think he was kind of unquestionably the best top laner in Europe over the course of 2020. So it just is really a bummer to me that we didn't get to see him with a good roster, that we're not going to get to see him potentially on a good roster ever again.
Right. I know. I get why you meant that now, because here's the thing. When I was like excited that he was joining, I can't lie, that was my TSM anti-TSM bias.
Sure,
where
that's fair.
I just thought to myself, awesome. Yeah. Team Liquid getting another amazing player, picking another great one. Who's TSM? Who gives a fuck who they're getting? Like, great roll on the season. Jensen, you have any thoughts on this? Alfari to Team Liquid if it happens?
I think it'll be interesting. Like, I'm gonna approach it from, like, if I'm gonna roleplay as Team Liquid, right? Like, what are the changes that I make? So we have had this roster as kind of the same core we played towards bot side, and then this is the level of success they have had. They finished, I think, 3-3 twice now, and both times they were like chasing it. It's not like you say that, okay, if some small things go differently, maybe they make it out, right? The loss to Machi is a very clear loss. It's not like some freak Baron steal happens and they lose that game or something. So I do think changes need to be made, and is this the right way to upgrade the roster? I think this is them trying to double down on their play style. But then the question is, what's the overall approach towards fixing their problems, right? What are Team Liquid's issues when they reach international events? What are Team Liquid's issues, or even within the context of the summer split itself? And does bringing it out very necessary solve these problems? And I don't watch enough NLCS to have a very good good answer as to whether
why
this
would
is
you why would you I like the move for Liquid for sure. I think that Impact as a player, I think Alfari always goes in and gives the game his all, and has a more diverse champion pool and diverse play style than Impact does. I think Impact can phone it in at times, but Impact actually always shows up when it matters, like in playoffs. But if you want somebody who I think is probably more motivated at this point in time, is a little bit hungrier, adds more dimension to your play, then I'd take Alfari. And especially, with all of the Liquid contracts basically coming up at the end of this year, I think except for Core's, right?
I think he was signed to more, yeah.
Yeah, I think Core JJ is signed to more. So you're obviously going to build around him, because why would you ever get rid of him? NA supports are terrible. He is by far the best support in North America. So with that in mind, and Tactical seems to be working out with your team play style pretty well. And if you're not looking, if you want just to keep Tactical as sort of a, I don't know, safe 80 carry pick that allows Core to open up the map, well, then you need to keep Jensen. It would be better to get a better carry top laner so that you have a little bit, some more options to play around in terms of your solo lane. Now,
I can actually give a, sorry.
Yeah, go.
You finish. Yeah, I actually can give an interesting take with regards to this, right? Because when Doublelift had the whole drama with leaving Team Liquid and stuff like that, he kind of hinted that there was a split in the team where the Koreans wanted to call things the Korean way. And if you look at the changes that's being made, it's not just possibly an Impact leaving the roster. I do believe their staff have been allowed, their Korean stuff.
I think they said like Kane's going as well. So I think that was Travis on his show said Kane would maybe be leaving. Yeah, something like that.
Yeah. So I mean, those are rumors. I don't know whether they're confirmed or not. But if we see that happen, we might see a drop off in the way that Core JJ is performing. Right? Like he's gonna be losing all these people that he's familiar with, and what might, as at least within my experience, like with or hearing about Korean players, is that they tend to form their own blocks in which that they talk with each other and stuff, and that was going to remove a very big comfort factor. Although CoreJJ's English has improved, I don't necessarily think that he's at a fluent level where he's able to banter and like fully integrate with the American players. And I think that is going to we might actually see a big drop off in performance from CoreJJ, or we might even see Liquid just say that, okay, we're just going to do a full rebuild and we're going to be building around these other principles instead, and we're going to get rid of any potential baggage that the team might have had from the previous years as well.
Thing is, as exciting as this move is, the problem for me is it all hinges on what they do at jungle. Like, it's obvious they have to get rid of Brock, so that goes out saying. So the point is, if they can get some banger jungler, now he can just be the best in NA, clearly. Like, they already had some really good pieces. Look, dude, they almost won LCS without a jungler, essentially. Like, that's not even much flame. Like, he just didn't do much in the games. Like, I feel like if they get someone good and Alfari, at least within their region, it's going to be very interesting.
Well, I think Santorin's probably the obvious pickup for them. Yeah, because it's been hinted at, and also he's a North American resident, which again gives you more flexibility with your roster if you're Team Liquid, and that's kind of how they've been building up before. Impact's obviously a resident. I forget if Core is or not right now.
I don't think he's been there long enough, surely.
Yeah, so I guess if they were going to do that, then basically they'd need to get an NA jungler because they would have Core and Alfari as their imports, right? So I guess it depends on whether Core does count as an import or not. But once you get, like, if you got Santorin, I think that it fits pretty nicely, especially with the style that Santorin's been developing over the last year and how good he's been overall. So, I mean, I think, like, Liquid's probably in a very good place if they get Alfaria. They're also in a unique place where if they want Jensen to re-sign, because I'm sure Jensen's going to have a ton of options because he is a resident, and so he's incredibly valuable as a free agent in the market. They have to make some big signings to keep him, would be my thing. So even though these are just rumors right now, as far as Team Liquid goes, this is going to be these signings, and Alfari is probably extremely important to their strategy, because the way that GMing in North America works is that Jensen's probably just going to talk to everybody and be like, get me the best teammates and I'll go to that team, because the players have so much control over rosters in North America overall. Again, guys, maybe part of the problem that you should be mad at is that the players kind of dictate the overall scene, which is crazy. But having that power means that you whoever is going to placate Jensen and get him the best roster is who's going to win him, because I would assume EG is probably going to go after him at the very least. There are a lot of teams that might need mid laners coming up, especially
the obvious one. The obvious one that's spicy. Listen, here's the one scenario. All it takes is this. Listen, Bjergsen, this is for you, homie. I'll give you one last parting gift. All you have to do is pick up that phone and say, hey, Jensen, hey, old buddy, old pal, in Danish, of course, blah, 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 blah. And then all you have to do at one point in time is you're just going to go like, are you going to say it? What do you mean? I said, we'd like you to join TSM. Just say it. And you were kind of better than me the last couple of years. Deal, I'm there. Like, that's all he's waiting to hear. If you say that, listen, I'm giving you this as a gift, mate, on a platter. That's all you need. That's all you need. And by the way, the reason why I would love that, I would love it so much, is because I love it when players that TSM fans have talked shit to for years join TSM.
Because they're all over them.
Doublelift being the best one ever. You would think Doublelift was your fucking brother, you TSM fans, when he joined your team. Because what's brilliant is he even had it twice. When he went to Team Liquid, y'all were with me on the bandwagon laughing at him, not making out of groups. Like, and then he comes back and you're like, leave Doublelift alone. He's had a hard time. Like, y'all have got no fucking, like, it's not even about self-awareness. You're just shameless. You're just so shameless as people. Like, how are you going to literally meme about Doublelift's trophy case for years when he then just comes and stacks trophies in your case? How are you going to do that? So I just think that would be the ultimate, like, ridiculous wrestling move storyline,
Yeah, and by the way, Thorin, what's super interesting about the Bjergsen retirement and it being so sudden is that I am sure that move threw the entire NA, like, off season into fucking insanity, by the way, because the teams have already been working for weeks, even though you guys are looking at, you're like, well, teams can't sign players yet, but so many players have already been released by their teams when it comes to being able to talk to other organizations. And you have to understand that the way this develops is, like, as soon as Worlds starts, guys, every year, all of the LCS teams, that aren't at Worlds immediately start like building up their rosters or like making plans around where the free agent dominoes are going to fall. And the fact that TSM needs a mid laner now is insanely important to the overall ecosystem and the way these rosters are going to be built. And so the fact that this happens so late, I mean, it's not even technically the offseason yet, but so late into the season means that there are going to be tons of teams scrambling around, because now TSM is going to be out in the market for a mid laner. And if they can get Jensen, who's a resident, that would be perfect for them, because that was their strength before, was that they had a resident mid laner so they could import 2 other players. So TSM is definitely going to be going after Jensen, you would have to believe. And especially considering, you know, I don't know what his relationship to Bjergsen is, or if he would want to be coached in that situation, because remember, TSM's problem, they couldn't get a coach. Remember, they made a post this year after spring saying, please become our head coach. And you know what happened? They just put Parth back in there, guys. You know, this is a team that most coaches don't want to go to, because it's incredible.
It's the ultimate poison chalice, isn't it?
It's the poison chalice. Like, everyone in League of Legends knows that the TSM coaching job is horrible, because you have a chance of getting overruled at any time. The players themselves are effectively the coaches. And I'm very curious about Bjergsen, because even though I think it's good that veteran players, especially Bjergsen, has a very like thoughtful, even-tempered mentality. Like, he's a very calm person. He's a very introspective person. And I think he does have like the emotional weight to be a good coach in the long run. Coaching teammates that you just played with is really hard, guys. Like, I think it may hurt, but I think the best direction for TSM is just to try and go rookies. And what you want is the players who never played with Bjergsen, or who played with him just a little bit like Spica, but respect him and haven't had years of interaction with him as a peer instead of as a coach or kind of an older figure. You want Bjergsen to take these kind of rookie players and then mold them, because there's like, if they keep the majority of the roster, there's too much fucking baggage, dude. Like, you can't keep Double Lift and turn Bjergsen into his coach, because they've spent too many years playing together as equals, and the kind of hierarchical relationship that has to develop in order for that team to be successful simply won't be there.
Did you see though the post? Oh, sorry, go ahead, Jensen.
I think it's actually really weird, and I think it says a lot about, I'm not sure if it says a lot about any organizations as a whole, or if it's just about TSM, the fact that they transition a player directly from playing into being a head coach position. Because as a head coach, your responsibility is not just going down there and it's like, yeah, you make this rotation over here, this is the draft for this week and stuff like that. It's a lot about planning for the long term. It's a lot about mediating things. It's a lot about measuring what the player dynamics are like. And I'm not that I'm going to doubt Bjergsen's ability to do all of these things right off the bat, but in general, you would usually want somebody who has had time to take on some form of leadership experience, to at least develop their capacity planning for things and stuff like that. I do believe it might be a head coach entitled thing, and maybe Parth and Reginald doing these style things as well. But the fact that they can promote somebody into a head coach position like that probably says about what the job scope of the other head coaches they had in the past was like, and why it became such a poison chalice, right? Because you just end up becoming a strategy guy, and then you would say things, the players would disagree with you, and then they didn't have a way of breaking those disagreements, so the players won on in the end, and then the head coach could just sit down there silently. And all those famous examples when they talk about the various ex-TSM coaches who just sit down behind and nod their head as Reginald speaks. And but whether this will happen to Bjergsen, I'm not sure, because now he's coming into the exact scenario where his predecessor coaches have been. So it's going to be interesting to see, and it's for these exact same reasons why I would think that TSM Jensen would probably not happen, right? Because if I'm the other Jensen, right, and I'm looking at this now, I would not go to TSM.
Look, man, I agree with you. It's not something that I think is smart for them to do, but I think that TSM will not take the long-term perspective. I don't think they have the balls.
It's not really their MO.
Yeah, it's not their MO. They don't have the balls to go to their fan base and say, hey, we're going to go into a full rebuild right now. We need to make sure Bjergsen learns how to be a coach. We literally cannot have him learn how to be an effective coach with teammates that he's played with for years. So we're going to start developing talent in our region, and we trust that Bjergsen is going to be the shepherd who can lead this flock to success in 2 years, right? They won't.
I mean,
that there's a strategy that has not been considered, which is the import from the LPL. And this is something that TSM can set up for it, right?
As an import coach or a player?
No, players. They can look at import players from the LPL, right?
Nobody's tried that. I got to give it to you. Yeah. I'm not sure Bjergsen would be the greatest coach for that roster, but yeah.
Because I think the last thing that you want Bjergsen to be doing as somebody who transitions fresh from a player into a head coach. I mean, you can do it if you transition from player to position of coach, and then you can have them like do the position of coaching for somebody else. Because the last thing you want Bjergsen to be doing is to be coaching mid lane in your first debut as a head coach. Because all of a sudden that's just going to be your entire focus. That's what you're comfortable with, and then you are not setting up for success. If you get Bjergsen to coach somebody else in the mid lane position, right? He can share advice of it, but or maybe it might just be the most TSM thing to do, right? Where it's just upper management just being this overbearing force, just coming down on people all the time. But I do think that going with an LPL mid who's like self-sustainable, and then Bjergsen's like working out, like trying to find his teething, finding his footing, or path, then maybe Peter Zhang comes in as a translator / coach or whatsoever to help him out transition into the period of being a head coach. So in this year, it's not about developing TSM for the future, but it's about developing Bjergsen as head coach for the future while being in the position of a head coach. So that might be the strategy.
Also, I don't know if you saw this, Monty, but the most hilarious thing is, this is where, again, fans can just fuck off. Because I always have been consistent with this, which is if you're a fan, Fnatic fan, TSM fan, if you defend the players on your team and say, no, they are good enough and I like them and I think they are some of the best, don't then be like, yay, changes in the team. No, you wanted that team. I want you to have Nemesis as your mid laner and Fnatic forever. If you think that guy's legit, sign up forever. I'm willing to take the other side of that deal, and I can't wait to watch him play 10 more seasons in your team. They never do, of course. They're all little rats. The second it's the off-season, please, Perks, please, everyone just come and join Fnatic. Like, all the TSM fans are doing that. So I don't know if you've seen, but it's essentially implied they're going to blow up most of the team. Most hilarious angle, of course, the idea they might cut double lift. Like, so you sacrificed all that integrity, all those aspects, you borderline cheated, and for what? At the end of the year, you dump him anyway. Like, that's a fucking joke. And then, I don't know, the funniest one, I don't know if you saw this, Monty, was this is also the other problem with being in TSM. Because you spend your whole life looking at Reggie and going, well, last thing I want's that guy giving me the fucking special hairdryer treatment right in my face. I think I'll just chill on that one. What you have to do is be mad passive-aggressive. So I don't know if you saw that Broken Blade posted an Instagram picture. No. The Instagram picture has the sort of tagline, like the description that like an emo 14-year-old girl posts when her boyfriend just cheated on her. It just said stuff like, don't take things for granted or something. Picture of him, no TSM jerseys, 2 middle fingers. All I'm going to say is, I think he might be out with TSM, guys. I don't know about you. I'm getting a vibe over here. You're like, give me a break.
Wow.
Isn't that brutal? Because he actually did his fucking job. I thought he was actually a solid player on TSM.
I agree. I think he was a role player that did just fine. I mean, I think he did what was asked of him most of the time. I think he was pretty crucial to their playoffs run overall in terms of them playing into him and into his strengths as a carry. So that's... Oh,
by the way, let me just, at the end of the show, let me just tease everyone for what the off-season is going to be like. Because you're probably thinking, off-season, content's going to slow down a bit. There's no games, talk shows. You can only kind of have fun guests, No. Forget, this is Thorin. Like, I can do all of history. I can do other things. So guess what? Like I said earlier about how I feel like freed, like my spirit's been freed by not worrying about Reddit. I'm going to make some outrageous videos in this off season. Like, I'm going to make a whole series that's just me reading the TSM subreddit and showing you who you people are. I'm going to show you before playoffs. I'm going to show you after playoffs. I'm going to do videos like, I made one like this back in the day where it was called Why Nobody Likes TSM Fans. Put it this way, that series has legs, boys. That one could run for a long time. That could be like I Love Lucy or some shit. You could just get into the fucking groove of that. Like, the same catchphrase. Listen, and so it's going to be like that the whole way. Like, all your sacred cows, I'm going to gore them and make fucking hamburgers out of them. And I'm going to feed them to little TSM fans who are grown up now. And then they'll be like, love burgers. And be like, that was fucking Bjergsen's international career you just ate. I can't wait. This offseason is going to be chef's kiss, beautiful. Just get ready. Because remember, boys, what are you going to do? Downvote me on Reddit. Too late. You already did. Oh, and I'm not on Reddit. That's a bitch. Well, I tell you what, go and thumbs down my video on YouTube. It still counts the algorithm, bitch. Like that. There we go.
And I will say that there's probably some really fun off-season content to be made around these trades.
Of course.
Because with TSM's actions, they're blowing up everything. And I really can't understate how important it was that Bjergsen made this transition, because in an off-season where I think a lot of the dominoes were already falling from my knowledge behind the scenes, and like I was like, oh, this is going to look pretty normal. I think everything's like everything is gone now. It's just like on fire in terms of the LCS in particular. And I think that the moves are going to be absolutely fucking insane this offseason for LCS. So I think this particular offseason, when you consider the fact that the liquid contracts are all up as well, this is going to be huge movement, even more so than normal. So we can sit around and pontificate on that at a later time for sure.
Also, I'll just throw in one last barb, right? Just take stock of where you are right now, TSM fans. You're salivating over busted up Licorice joining your team. Unless he's bringing a time machine with him, I'd be trying to ask for Alfari. I'd be asking for the best player. You're trying to get people's leftovers. That's who you are, TSM. Beautiful, isn't it? I didn't have to do it. You did it to yourselves, karma. There you go.
All right, Jensen. Thank you very much for joining us. Shout out your YouTube channel so people can look for your prediction video when you actually make it.
I'm actually very new to the whole SEO thing, but I think if you follow my Twitter, that'll be easier because I'll post an update on Twitter as well with regards to that, right?
And your Twitter is?
Twitter at the Jupiter Storm.
The Jupiter Storm.
The planet, and then the weather condition.
Change that fucking Twitter name. No one's ever going to find that, mate. It's got to be Jensen something. I'd literally, no joke, I would make the branding like, no, not TL Jensen or something. I'd make it like, that's banter if you call your Twitter name that, you know.
No, you call yourself, no, you have to insult him at the same time, or sort of backhanded insult him. So you go something like the smart Jensen or something like that.
Okay.
Right?
Edgy.
Make your own brand there. Make your own brand. All right. Well, thank you very much. Really good talking with you. I assume we'll be back next week to joke about Worlds and the World Finals.
Yes.
And probably won't be the most serious episode because
probably the least watched episode as well.
but it'll be a good time. So we'll be back then and kind of wrap it up for the moment, and then we'll maybe have some emergency episodes here or there depending on the crazy roster moves that happens to make more jokes about TSM. So we'll see you guys then. Thanks a lot.